gave me as a title. I also do QAnon-specific analysis for a company called Alethea Group out of Washington, D.C., which is like a consultancy firm that tracks disinformation and stuff like that. So I do it for a living now, too, which is, like I said, not what I thought I'd be doing, but I'm very happy that I'm doing it. Maybe not so happy that it's happening, but very happy that I'm involved in taking this on and keeping an eye on it. So
I think that's pretty fucking cool, honestly.
Those are some thick-ass credentials, my dude.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a long road. I was not
expecting that.
No, I've told that story a couple of times, and it's kind of an interesting story for people who are, I don't know, interested, I guess. It was a long road getting from, there to here, to quote one of my favorite Star Trek intro themes. But and I don't know, I just it's something that I can just do naturally. It's just it was a natural pickup for me. I really enjoy it. I don't necessarily enjoy a lot of the content that I see, but I do enjoy the process of analyzing it and sort of reporting on what's important and stuff.
So I actually feel completely disconnected from QAnon because I've been teaching so much this past spring and I just didn't have the time to really devote towards a lot of it. Mm-hmm. What is going on with QAnon? I mean, it's probably a good thing for everybody watching and probably everyone else here, but can you give us an update into the saga?
Yeah, sure. So to kind of remark on the current state of affairs, I guess the best way to describe it is we're in a post-Q and post-Trump sort of world as far as they're concerned, right? So after January 6th, Trump was kicked off a lot of mainstream platforms. The mainstream platforms really picked up their moderation of QAnon influencers and atmospheres and groups and so forth. So the movement went over to Telegram, primarily Telegram, but also some other alternative social media sites like Gab, for example. And what happened there, especially in a post-Q world where now we don't have this sort of overarching, prophetic figure that's giving these Q drops and sort of guiding the conspiracy narratives, you had individual influencers sort of pick it up and run with it at that point. These influencers are now the main stewards of the QAnon movement. And a lot of these influencers are sort of, I guess what you could consider them more traditional in the sense that they haven't really deviated from where they were initially, especially within one of the larger sort of networks you call We the Media. That's people like Jordan Sather and Patel Patriot and Praying Medic and people like that. QAnon John, you could also put in that category, John Sabal. But then you had other QAnon influencers sort of take it in radically different directions. These are people that I'm thinking of like Ghost Ezra, who took an incredibly anti-Semitic and sort of pro-Nazi approach to the QAnon movement, taking these QAnon adherents who, I mean, in my opinion, and in my sort of own independent research, QAnon is a great primer for that sort of Christian identity, anti-Semitism, and that, for a lot of different reasons I can get into later. But that's the sort of approach Ghost Ezra took with it. Or you have somebody like Negative 48, Michael Protzman, who brought, the whole crew down to Dallas to await the return of John F. Kennedy Jr. Or John F. Kennedy Sr. I still can't remember which one specifically they're waiting for, but they're waiting for one of the Kennedys who's dead to return.
I think it's the junior.
It could be, yeah. Which is why actually, I think that it might be Senior, because that's why they went to Dallas in the first place, to sort of summon him from where he passed initially. But either way, yeah, it's either Junior or Senior. None of them are waiting for the return of Ted Kennedy, that's for sure. And then you have people like even international influencers too, like Romana Didulo is another one that I followed kind of closely as well. The self-proclaimed Queen of Canada, who lots of people like to take approach it with sort of like a lens that's kind of kooky, it's kind of interesting, and that she's sort of harmless, but that's not really the case at all. I mean, she's inspired sort of like this proto-militia type of deal back in November, where she raised groups of what she called duck hunters to go out and arrest and, if needed, execute certain figures that were pushing the COVID vaccine onto children. more recently now, she's sort of convinced her followers that they don't have to pay their bills anymore. And it's becoming kind of a problem, right? Because now lots of these followers are getting their utilities shut off, and they're writing to Ramana Didulo like, hey, like, what do I do about this? And she's taking lists of companies, and I assume what's going to happen is there's going to be more like cease and desist letters coming out of that camp, more threats of arrests and so forth. But really, Queen Ramana's like, I call her the hardest LARP in the movement, because it really takes some serious dedication to believe that you're the queen of an entire country and organize around that premise. I mean, that's incredible, in the worst way. But yeah, that's sort of where we're at now. And now, especially, and I've been seeing this more and more in the past couple of days, you're also starting to see this sort of negotiation between people who would trust the plan. Of course, the plan is that Donald Trump is going to come back and he's going to arrest all of the members of the deep state and the liberals, and he's going to, like, sort of that apocalyptic kind of narrative. He's going to usher in like an era of prosperity for America. He's going to make America great again. America's going to be awakened, and all the liberals are going to be dead or in jail. You have sort of that negotiating with like sort of a frustrated group of people. You know, they're frustrated at the fact that the plan hasn't come to fruition yet, that the storm hasn't come to fruition yet. So now you're starting to see people abandon Trump. You know, sort of think of Trump as like just another member of the deep state. This whole time he's been playing us, and now there's a chance that they might have to actually act on their own, which is incredibly alarming. I think that the more time goes by that the plan doesn't happen, you're going to have people who are more likely to, or maybe not more likely to, but you know, you're going to see increasing calls for activity on the behest of actual QAnon adherents, aside from being just digital soldiers and memeing about it or tweeting about it. You're going to see people who want to take matters into their own hands. And it's like being tied to the railroad tracks and seeing the train come, because, you know, you're seeing all these things. They're dehumanizing their outgroup. They're desensitizing their following to violence. And if you ask me, it's not necessarily a question of if anymore. It's a question of when and where something awful like the whole Pizzagate conspiracy and the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria shooting, something like that actually happens. Problem is it's practically impossible to tell when or where that will be. So that's the state of affairs right now. It's pretty bleak. I mean, there's elections side of it too, very elections heavy. Like there's a group, a coalition of QAnon candidates out there that are running for Secretary of State in various states, that are willing to overturn votes of, you know, or rather election outcomes, right? So if somebody they deem a member of this deep state actually goes and wins an election, the Secretary of State, if they're part of this coalition, will nullify that particular candidate and their victory. So it's a pretty problematic thing. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't get too exhaustive there. I know I have a tendency to ramble about this sort of stuff, especially if you let me.
Not at all.
There's so much to cover. Like, go
There's
off.
a lot of lore.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that, you know, the lore is really it's scattered. I mean, you have a basic sort of outline, which is, of course, that there's this deep state, and, you know, that there's a team of undercover, what you would call white hats, if you were in the QAnon movement, that are fighting against this deep state. But it really is what Travis View would call a big tent conspiracy, or what Michael Barkin would call like a super conspiracy narrative, where you have this sort of outline, and then so many other conspiracy theories from the past 40 or 50 years just get thrown under there and fill in the blanks. So there
By
is
the
a
way,
lot of
that's
lore.
a really good book called Culture of Conspiracy that you referenced. Oh my God, that book! I should have read that like way back in the way back.
Yeah. If you're looking for like the 101 of conspiracy theories, that's the one to go with. I would recommend it 100 times over. I've read it 3 times. Can't say I remember everything in it because it is very dense. But it's certainly one of the best volumes out there. Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so
I could just
I have a
peg you
go
with
ahead.
questions all day, but yeah, go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to almost like take a step back, at least from Q, the QAnon stuff, like immediately, just because you mentioned that you like work for a consultancy firm.
Mhm.
I don't know if you can like actually reveal like the exact clients, but like who does the consultancy firm actually like give this information to? Like all of the research and reconnaissance that you're probably doing, like where does that information end up? Like who is taking advantage of the work that you do to like learn more about what's going on with QAnon and what the followers have planned, like the stuff that they're doing? Because at least from like my perspective, I'm a scientist. I try and speak out against like COVID vaccine misinformation as an example. And so I like think in my head, a group like the CDC or some sort of working group within the CDC could like really benefit from a lot of this information to try and like get out ahead of like the current anti-vax narratives or whatever happened to be rummaging around those Q circles at the time. So could you maybe just comment a little bit about that?
Yeah. So like you said, I cannot. Under no circumstances am I allowed to reveal who our clients are, or even like the exact nature of the kind of work that I do. But obviously, QAnon, right, being the big tent conspiracy theory that it is, and the sort of the real time development of that conspiracy theory will bring in all sorts of different players from all over the place. I mean, you had the Disney groomer rhetoric that was going around. Of course, there's the vaccines. Lots of different medical equipment get shoved in there. So really, it's the hang on one second. It really is the those companies, those individuals that sort of get caught up in those conspiracy theories that are most interested in that information. That way, you can sort of defend against it through like issuing counter narratives. You can strategize your own business moves a little bit better, or even sue for libel if that's applicable. Which sadly, with conspiracy theories, that seems to be a little bit more difficult than one might actually believe, because it's really more about asking bad faith questions than it really is about telling lies. But that is a part of it. So really, it is all the individuals and the companies and organizations that get caught in the crossfire of conspiracy theories that are quite interested in and either don't have the resources directly or the expertise to sort of explore these milieus, the cultic milieu as Barkin would call it. So yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell. Of course, without revealing too much and getting myself into trouble. That's what I do professionally. Yeah, for now.
Yeah, but please don't jeopardize your own work. We're not that special. We don't deserve that kind of candor.
He said too much. We're all going to die now.
Yeah, watch out for the
red
laser
Ministry
beam.
of Science next week. Yeah, post something on 4chan. I don't know.
Yeah, if I don't show up stream on Tuesday, it was the heart attack gun.
Gonna get an acute case of Havana syndrome.
Yes. Yeah. I'll poop my pants and then die like all of the embassy workers in Cuba.
So, Greg, I know you've been kind of real interested in this stuff. What you got any questions for Alex here?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I guess like the transition, it feels like there's just been a huge change. That's what's so interesting for me is like so much about the Q drops, and you look in these, because I've been in these circles since like 2015 because I'm a masochist or something and I like to read it. I don't know why. So they're like dissecting Q drops. They're looking at what's the words with numerology, a lot of like that's the new information. But now it seems just like you read their stuff and it is a lot of people that are really disappointed. What's going on, and you see a lot of their every like couple months. There's always that post that's like, guys, there's going to be a lot of people in your life that are really shocked at the events that are going to happen. You got to support them. You got to like help them through it. And what they're thinking is all these people the storm is going to happen, which is the whole event of the culmination of all this stuff. And then it just never happens. And I don't know, man. I feel like it feels like to me when I read this stuff right now compared to 2015, 2016, it's like a ship without a rudder right now. And I guess that's like, I don't know if that's more or less scary because like before when they were looking at the QAnon drops and stuff like that, it was kind of like a cute little like side thing, but now it's like I feel like their whole impetus and their whole drive can just be directed in weird ways, and I don't know what direction it's going to happen. So you know,
right.
like, I'm not really a question, but
no, but it's true. I mean that, and to, whether it's more or less scary, it's certainly more scary. Certainly, I would say. I mean, at least with this, it could still happen. Could have still happened under Q, but you know, Q is really, well, if you want to think about it in like terms of Christianity, for example, which is a comparison and like a metaphor that's commonly drawn in the QAnon research community, right? Is really Q was sort of like the author of like a messianic kind of text, you know what I mean? And from that text, you can draw a dozen different interpretations if you're, I suppose, if you're willing enough. Because I'm sure you've read Q drops. They're not incredibly comprehensive. They're not incredibly revealing. It's a lot of, you know, Socratic questions. It's a lot of like very obscure.
Whatever
things.
meaning is pulled from the Q drops is just whoever gets the most viral meaning attributed to it is what I've kind of picked up on. Is like a line could be completely meaningless, but if someone says that it means something and that meaning goes viral, then that's what it ends up being.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's a lot of people who still look to the Q drops for inspiration and sort of trying to connect current events back to Q drops because, of course, they think that Q is not only an insider, but they can also tell the future in a lot of, you know, strange ways. So there are people who, you know, still use Q and sort of like exhaustively, you know. But like I said, you have somebody like Ghost Ezra, for example, who is now, at least a year later, distancing themselves, you know. His name's Robert Smart. He's an individual from Boca Raton. Logically, AI ended up doxing them in August. Somebody like Smart, who's distancing himself from QAnon, like mythos, you know, like making fun of a lot of the common phrases that are used, like white hats or nothing can stop what is coming, or the idea of the storm, and distancing himself from Trump, right? Using like religious symbols, like the golden bull from the Old Testament, like how the you know, the Israelites that were escaping Egypt were like worshiping the golden bull, and that really set God off. Like that, drawing comparisons like that, you know, distancing himself from Trump and from Q altogether, and going more explicitly anti-Semitic. Now that's an important distinction, I think. I mean, QAnon as a whole is very anti-Semitic, especially the influencers, and that's really where it serves its most sinister purpose, is like unwittingly turning its adherents more and more anti-Semitic, you know, slowly but surely. With Ghost Ezra, it's like total pro-Nazi shit. I mean, it's, you know, he lauds Hitler. He's using Christian identity sort of theories and mixing that in with his narratives. And it's blatant, you know. So he's sort of taking Q's disappearance to his own advantage. Now, if Q ends up returning, do I think that he's going to go back? No, probably not. But most of the movement still, I guess, looks forward to Q's return, and in some instances, and this is sort of a growing consensus among, especially like the We the Media and some of the more traditional influencers in there, that Q actually has returned on Truth Social. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but there's
I've heard of this.
Yeah, so Q actually, there's a Q account on Truth Social. It's just @Q, and you know, whoever's behind this account actually came out and said that they were a troll, that they were a LARP, like completely. And but now this individual's posting more and more as if they were Q, like different style, posting like more photos, interacting more with people on Truth Social, because obviously it's a different platform than 8kun or 8chan. But now you're starting to see more of these traditional influencers looking toward little Q as if they were actually Q and trying to figure out, you know, is this the same person? Because they're so dependent on Q's guidance, or Q's inspiration, I guess. But no, that, like I said, there are the instances where it's been abandoned. Beach Milk on Gab is another example. He or she, I don't know who's behind Beach Milk, but they're starting to sort of distance themselves away from QAnon lore in the same respect. But there are a lot of diehard Q adherents still within that audience that are being influenced by the harder, more programmatic extremist narratives that they're bringing in. So, I mean, that's...
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just
gonna ask, why do you think they haven't found someone new to cling to? Like Marjorie Taylor Greene has been Q from pretty much day one. Why haven't they, like, I have my thoughts as to why, but why, in your professional opinion, why do you think they haven't clung to someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene or other congressional, like, representatives who are obviously and explicitly, like, with Q?
And to add on to that, like other examples that are in like the IDW and more reactionary spaces online, someone like Nick Fuentes or Stu Peters.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Probably because Q hasn't taken a real. I mean, this is just conjecture. Like, this is not something that I've actually really thought about all that much, to be quite honest with you. But probably because of the fact that Q avoids taking a solid, stated position on anything, right? The drops that he or she or they, the team, leave are so open to interpretation. So when you have a figure like Stu Peters actually has sort of made fun of the Q movement in the past. So I know there are probably like some QAnon adherents that sort of look up to Stu Peters, but a lot of the influencers don't really like him. Like that last, documentary that he did, Watch the Water, had a Q name, and it was definitely trying to appeal to a QAnon audience. But like the main body of the QAnon influencers, like within We the Media, just totally bashed it, man, because they think he's a loser or something. I don't know. But I would say that's really the crutch there, is the fact that Q, unlike an actual person, like an actual radio personality, media personality, doesn't really take a position.
Well, I meant
you know?
like as a Trump figure, not as a Q figure. But I think someone in the chat said it, like, they were talking about Q, but I think it applies to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump as well. But like with Trump, he would say like side comments that would kind of like give them head pats and let them be on their way. But like with someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's too out there. She's too agreed with them that they don't have any puzzles to decipher, so she's not as interesting, I guess. I don't know.
In other words, she's a basic bitch. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. She's a basic Q bitch.
Well, yeah, I mean, like her speech patterns.
She's too fettuccine for him.
Exactly.
Her speech patterns.
With Trump, there were puzzles and mysteries to solve with like the side comments.
Exactly, because like
before the storm.
Because Trump never like finished his sentences, and because he kind of like put out weird things like kafefe and stuff like that. It's kind of like you can discern and kind of like use numerology to try to see what he actually means and all that kind of stuff. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene, at least from what I've read in the Q forums and stuff, it's just kind of like seen as someone that's just trying to latch on to what they see as this huge movement going forward. Not as a player in the actual thing. Like, she's not leaking anything. She's not talking about anything cryptic. They're linking anything together.
Well, and like you said, she's just latching on, right? A figure like Trump was there from the beginning. It was Trump's calm before the storm argument that actually sparked this whole idea of the storm, of Q, and would eventually, that would eventually become QAnon. Somebody like Taylor Greene or Boebert or, any of these other figures, they sort of latched on late. They're not baked into the core idea, right? It was always the military selected Donald Trump because he was an outsider to take on this deep state. And because he was there from the beginning, because he was sort of baked into that narrative from the very start, I think that's really what has people so hooked on him. Not to say that there aren't people who are starting to dismiss him as part of that broader deep state now. I mean, that's just a result of frustration with the fact that they're not getting what they want.
I was
Yeah,
going
'cause
to
they're-
ask, has the broader Q movements that are still like active within that space, have they distanced themselves for Trump? Has he lost the sauce?
Dude, he abandoned these people that went to the January 6th, and now they're going to jail, and they feel like he's completely they've abandoned him. So here they are doing exactly what he wanted. Here's something that they read the tea leaves. They were there for him, and Trump never didn't come through on their eyes.
Yes and no. You know, that's the thing, is that it's you never get like a complete overarching answer to that particular question. I would say overall, the most common position is that Trump is still out there. He's either preparing for his return, or he's secretly the president, you know, and Joe Biden is just the so-called resident, what they call him, or you know, that Trump actually has the nuclear codes and Biden does everything else.
my God.
It's more rare. It's really only when the influencer themselves start to denounce and sort of doubt Trump in that way. And to be quite honest with you, what I've noticed is that even some things that Trump does, QAnon has their own, like the adherents in the community, they have their own values that they'll put over Trump's word as final. Take Dr. Oz, for example. I mean, Trump came out and he endorsed Dr. Oz, and 90% of the QAnon movement said no. We don't want this guy because he's part
of the media.
He's part of the media. He's done an episode about transgender kids, so obviously he's got a hidden agenda, you know. And lots of people said, well, you know, maybe Trump is just putting him out there so that way we can expose him. That was like their rationale behind, you know, them not liking Oz and Trump endorsing him. Others, like Beach Milk, are saying, you know, this is one decision of Trump's that I just don't agree with. You know, and they're going against him that way. And then there are others like Ghost Ezra, like I said, who say, no, you know, Trump is just not who he thought he was. He's a reptilian, or, you know, he's a...
That's nice.
He's a globalist.
Right. And I mean, a lot of that is the fact that, you know, and there are lots of conflicting, like sort of qualities that Trump had, even during his presidency, that are sort of coming to light now, because of the fact that he's not really visibly in control anymore, namely his support for Israel. Of course, there are people like Craig Longley, who is very, very, very critical of Israel to the point of anti-Semitism. I mean, you could be critical of Israel and not be anti-Semitic, but this is very anti-Semitic criticism of Israel, and say something like, well, Q said Israel was going to be last, so obviously whatever Trump is doing in favor of Israel is part of the plan. Mm-hmm. Whereas Ghost Ezra is not that way. He's using Trump's support of Israel as a way to turn his followers, and particularly his Q-pilled following, against Trump. So there's lots of negotiation going on in these spaces between the influencers and the adherents, you know, surrounding these figures. But Trump, like I said, was baked into it from the very beginning. And it's that sort of inherent role that he had that really puts him at the top over a figure who just took the oath like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, if we're going to talk about General Flynn, that's a little bit of a different subject, I guess, because he's obviously was part of the Trump administration, so he's held a little bit higher regard because he was also there from the beginning. You know what I mean? Even though he's not Trump.
How does the QAnon movement feel about Mike Pillow?
Oh my God.
If I had to guess, I mean, they retweet a lot of his stuff. I mean, he's a very interesting character. It's not every day at a, you know, like a evangelical Christian event that you're going to have some guy get up there and start talking about the times that he used crack. You know, so that's a very interesting individual, that Mike Lindell. I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for how an individual would view him. He's certainly not lauded in the same respect as Trump or somebody like... Yeah,
because he doesn't seem to pass the smell test for anybody.
Yeah, if you want me to be honest, he seems to me like he's a useful idiot. If that's sort of... not trying to use that, in a derogatory way or anything like that, but I think that's really the vibe that I catch from him in these spaces. He's got lots of money. He's really ready and willing to spread the word of the Great Awakening, and they latch onto that. Of course, that's the best. But he's another sort of figure that kind of came in later in the game. He wasn't in the founding Trump group like Bannon was, or like Flynn.
Yeah, he came in so late. It's kind of a weird, just kind of like amalgamation. Like he was willing to say things that nobody else would. So he kind of just like, I don't know. It's just,
down with Dominion of Machines.
I feel like he was kind of foxholed into it, like into the Trumpism and the Q, because he would say stuff that no one else would. He kind of ended up being like, if he wanted a group, he was being shuffled that way.
And maybe he fell in love with the attention that he was getting and the community, and that's the damning thing about QAnon, especially is you fall in love, you have these ideas about the world. This confirms your worldview about liberals. It brings you deeper, and it gives you especially online, it gives you sort of a community that you can share these ideas with, and the more you interact with this community, and the more you try to bring that over to, say, like your real life friends, your real life family, and they sort of shun you for it, the deeper you're going to dive into that particular community. I can't remember which one of you said it, but seeing those posts like, you keep hanging on, like your friends, your family, they're going to be sorry when this happens, and they're going to think you're a wizard or you're a prophet, or because you knew this was all happening right before their eye. That's always the saddest thing to see, because that's how they really feel. I mean, they're willing to alienate the people that they love in real time for this ideal that's, clearly not going to come to fruition in the way that they imagine. I hope it doesn't come to fruition in the way that I imagine it will or would, but that's the damning thing about it, is just the more you sink yourself into it, the more you alienate your friends, and that just sort of reverberates back onto you and pushes you deeper and deeper into the mud. Maybe that's what happened to him. I can't really speak to his own personal experience. So,
what do you think about this mainstreaming? So, like, what I found interesting is, like, some of the stuff that you would see in the QAnon forums is now, like, making its way directly to Fox News. And some of the rhetoric that's like flowing, maybe they don't say Q, or maybe they don't, refer to the drops, but it's definitely the same freaking narrative.
And even at the most extreme ends, the kind of inoculation that the public has been exposed to with the most insane, like, lizard people, interdimensional vampire pedophile kind of rhetoric we hear from QAnon. You have Tucker Carlson now, over the last year, just openly doing great replacement theory. So it seems like, in comparison, this idea of, white genocide coming from mainstream outlets like Tucker Carlson is seemingly innocuous compared to the more extreme elements of the right.
Yeah, that's concerning, really, and it's something that I've been sort of trying to wrap my head around as well. Really, what I think it comes down to is the pandemic obviously spread QAnon like wildfire. So it became a really especially on Facebook is where it became really popular, and it sort of tackled that boomer Republican base that was sitting on Facebook trying to find answers to what was going on around them, this horrible pandemic event. And is it Trump's fault? Well, no, of course it's not Trump's fault, because look here, we have all of this deep state stuff going on. And what I think it did was that, that all started in QAnon. The memes and stuff like that were circulating Facebook started in QAnon without explicitly talking about QAnon, if that makes sense. Like, a lot of the same memes that QAnon would circulate circulated in mainstream spaces, but of course it doesn't have that whole backstory. Like, this was conceived on a 4chan board in a place where a letter posts these really long notes about, so forth and so on. And there's a cabal that drinks the blood of little kids and stuff like that. Like, memes don't come with that whole backstory, but they can sort of sort of prop up an individual, or they can prop up like a party, right? That will obviously, and at the time that was obviously the goal, was to sort of prop up Trump in that respect. So I really think that that's what it comes down to is the memes and stuff like that. And what happened was some people did more investigating and fell really deeply into the QAnon lore. Others sort of stayed at that more surface level sort of belief. But at the end of the day, I think what you're seeing now is the media and politicians sort of responding to that shift after the pandemic, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? They fell into it. Now, if you want to maintain sort of your voting base as like a mainstream Republican, you have to latch on to some sort of laundered aspect, like some sort of laundered version of these QAnon and these sort of right-wing, extremely right-wing narratives if you want to keep your voting base intact, or you want to keep your viewership in Tucker's case. So I really, that's what I would really chalk it up to at the end of the day. Like I said, this is something that I too have been trying to wrap my head around as well. But that's the thing is the right in America right now is a huge mess. It's there's so much interconnection. There's so much networking going on between different spaces and different beliefs and different ideas, especially within Telegram, which a buddy of mine describes as basically a cultic milieu plugged into an app, where people just negotiate all of these conspiracy theories. And what we know from conspiracy theories is that if you believe in one conspiracy theory, you tend to believe in other conspiracy theories as well. So it sort of enters into that, acts as that sort of gateway. I hope that answered your question, because like I said, this is something that I'm interested in finding out as well, as we see more of it.
No, I mean, yeah, you kind of just confirmed everything I've been thinking over the last kind of 6 months as I've been trying to clear my head from some of the stuff that I've been looking at hardcore. Yeah, I think Marcus has got a question for you.
Sure. I've got a small handful of them, just because I think chat kind of wants to catch up on some of the very like basic lore. So I think these are probably things, as the chief lore master, you could probably rattle off pretty quick.
The Q
really
dungeon
a lot
master.
Yeah, literally, that's kind of what it feels like. You're navigating us through the unfortunate campaign we have no choice but to participate in. But yeah, with all that being said, I think a lot of folks in chat are kind of curious as to like the general demographics of like people who adhere to QAnon, because there's the stereotype and like the base on Facebook that you kind of mentioned of like, the old Republican boomer who like just figured out the internet and now they just fall down a pipeline. But also kind of like Gremlo said too, a lot of the more millennial Zoomer influencers like Nick Fuentes and other people sort of in like the Nazi sphere, for lack of a better way to put it, like they also will incorporate a lot of Q content and Q ideas into what they sort of propagandize with online. So I guess question one is like, what's the general demographics of the Q base? And I think as a follow up to that, like how represented are they sort of in the Republican Party, and whether that's elected officials or sort of like voters. That's kind of the second half of that question.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say, I mean, this is something more difficult to navigate just because of the nature of the QAnon movement, right? I mean, so from what we can sort of gather, right, the average QAnon adherent might be your 35, 40, 50-year-old mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, who, like you said, spends a lot of time on Facebook and sort of gets dragged into it that way. I would say that's probably the primary sort of demographic, especially if you go on QAnon casualties. A lot of what you'll see on QAnon casualties is it's my mom, or it's my dad, or it's my aunt who brought my mom into the movement. It really is a lot of that sort of the boomer lifestyle that they really try to attack. And then, of course, there's the younger crowd, like the millennials, right? And typically those are the millennials that you'll see already who's invested a lot of their time in conspiracy theories already. QAnon sort of confirmed and incorporated a lot of those conspiracy theories and brought them in that way. As far as like percentages go, I do think that the boomers heavily outweigh the others. But I just couldn't give you any specifics on that. Basically, because if we tried to survey, you know, the QAnon movement, I think what will happen is lots of people will either lie in ways that'll mess the survey up and its accuracy. But there is one institute, PRRI. I can't remember what that stands for the life of me. I think it's like the Public Religious Research Institute, or PRRI.org is the name of the
Public Religion Research Institute.
Yes. They actually attempted to survey the QAnon movement in America, and they've been doing it for about a year now. What they discovered was that 1/5 of Americans actually believe in some iteration of this conspiracy theory. Now, you know, whether that's QAnon adjacent, they basically surveyed them on 3 of the main tenets, right? Yeah. I know. It was basically, you know, do you believe in a satanic cabal that traffics children? And they, you know,
I don't want to know this.
Yes.
I don't want to know this.
I'm sorry.
Take it back. Take it back. Take it out of my brain. Oh my God.
But yeah, no, what 1/5 of Americans, and a lot of that falls along the lines that you know, the more detailed findings are really sort of confirming what we believed initially. A significant amount of them are Protestants, particularly evangelical Protestants. Lots of these people, like a overwhelming proportion of these people, got their news from sources that were even more right-wing than Fox, although Fox was a big part of that also. A lot of them were white. Most of them were white. Very few of them were Jewish. For obvious reasons, because this is just a reiteration of thousands of years of Jew-hating conspiracy theories. And so, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, 20% of Americans believe in some iteration of the QAnon conspiracy theory. And what's more damning than that is the fact that they believe that violence might be necessary in order to restore American greatness or an American way of life. That's to me, that was the scariest finding. And this has not changed much at all over the course of the last year. The first study they did came out in May of 21, and they've been tracking it all throughout 21, and they came out with another updated version of that in February of 22, which basically had the same findings. 20% of Americans believe in this. So it's a frightening ordeal.
The survey data I looked at showed that it was primarily people from the suburbs and rural America, heavy concentration in the Midwest and the South. But the poll data that I had was not necessarily the best. But yeah, it resonates with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Like I was trying to say earlier, and it probably didn't come out as coherently as I thought it did. Like these kinds of polls that you try to survey the demographic of QAnon adherents, they may be more or less maybe they may be less accurate for the simple fact that QAnon adherents, they like to brigade things. Like somebody will put out, like, depending on how they actually conducted the poll, the Institute conducted the poll, QAnon adherents will go and brigade a particular poll to try to put a weight on the outcome. You know, they'll answer in like sort of non-genuine ways, or they may, or resonate with other aspects of the conspiracy theory more than they do the questions that are asked. You know what I mean? So it is kind of difficult. I think PRRI's study is really good, frighteningly good. But there are those sort of inherent difficulties when you're studying a massive conspiracy theory movement, is the fact that if you're trying to poll this for genuine reasons, they might think you're just a government shill, or that you're a government operative, or, whatever, yep. and they'll try to affect the outcome in ways that aren't genuine, So
part of the deep state.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, everybody. Yeah.
Well, I was just saying, could you, after you finish that thought, maybe walk chat through the kind of historical connections to Christian dominionism that QAnon and its elements have?
When you say, what do you mean by Christian dominionism? I'm sorry, I'm a
Sure.
little...
So Christian dominionism is like a return to the dominant class of Americans being like white Anglo-Saxon Protestants.
Sure. Right,
that eventually there will be some kind of violent conclusion to mankind that leads to Megiddo when all of the chosen people are back in Israel. That kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. Yes. Gotcha. So yeah. No. I mean, and that's the biggest parallel you see there is obviously with the Storm, right? And they resonate with the Great Replacement theory, in sort of more laundered ways. Like they're not taking up like the super white supremacist standpoint of, the Jews are, shipping in, brown people in order to take over the white man. Like that's not the version of the narrative explicitly that they're adopting. They go with the liberals are trying to bust in illegal immigrants to sort of change the voter demographic. So really that's the kind of the Great Replacement sort of version that they're fielding mostly. With QAnon, you see a lot of elements of Christianity. In comparison, like you have, like we were talking about earlier, the idea that QAnon is sort of a version of Christianity is not really is a really popular way of framing it. So you have like Q, which like acts as the Bible, and Trump maybe, who acts as sort of like this messianic savior figure, right? And then you have the Storm, which sort of acts as sort of that millennialist like apocalypse that's going to come in, and it's going to sort of usher in this
Revelations. Is that what
right.
it is? Yeah.
Precisely, just like Revelations, right? And that's why it's not very surprising that lots of people, a majority of QAnon adherents, are in fact Christians, and particularly evangelical Christians, because the evangelical Christians, right, like Christian Zionism has that same sort of worldview, right? That you're going to bring all of the Jews back to Israel, and then Christ is going to return. He's going to bring about the end of days or end times, and you're going to live out 1,000 years of peace and prosperity. So it's very mirrored in that way, and that's why it's not so surprising that QAnon really runs on those tracks of Christianity, because it's the same myth, but it's also pitching the same myth to people who've been hearing that myth practically their entire lives. And I think at the QAnon level, mostly race try to keep race out of it. Right? Or what they'll really try to do is they'll try to attribute racial tension to the deep state. That's actually a common tactic, is that all the racial tension in the world exists because somebody manufactures it that way. And that's not unracist, right? Because there's obviously very real racial tension in the United States. There's obviously very real systems of white supremacy that exist, and sort of chalking it up to like the sort of facade is... you're glossing over that real systemic white supremacy.
It's like what they did with BLM when they were trying to associate Antifa with the Nazi party or whatever the hell they had so many connections going on with Antifa, but like it was the same thing. They were kind of undermining, the foundation of the BLM movement, saying that it was all orchestrated by these bad faith actors and like
George
all
Soros.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Soros is a big enemy in the QAnon, world.
Which of course is that
He's
like
that
I always say that like these conspiracies, the reason that they're so appealing to so many is that there's like a nugget of truth hidden within the vast conspiracy. Like, yes, elites do have like outside power within the world, like wealthy actors and capital owners do, fuck around. But that conspiracy theory that wraps around it, that pulls people in, is like, oh, well, it's like a international cabal of pedophiles. It's, it's the international Jewry, all that shit.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and conspiracies themselves, they do exist, right? But, I mean, it's hardly ever as vast, overarching, and just, like, invulnerable. Like, it's hardly ever the nature that conspiracy theorists will try to portray them as. Like Watergate, there was a very specific goal in mind behind something like Watergate. Whereas, with a conspiracy theory, the goal is just domination, is just control. And, working, like seeing how like governments operate behind the scenes and stuff like that. I mean, anybody who's ever worked for a government or like an NGO that works with several governments to try to bring about some agreement, they know that there's no way that it could ever be so seamless and so coordinated, you know, and that's the real, like you said, that's the real draw behind conspiracy theories, is that there is a nugget of truth. There has been conspiracies in the past that sort of validate that thinking, that sort of way of thinking, what Joe Usinski, a very prominent political conspiracy theorist, researcher from University of Miami, calls conspiracy thinking. That does get validated in a lot of ways, but it gets completely blown out of proportion in some of the most heinous and ridiculous ways. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys.
I think that's the worst part of QAnon for me, is that people see an inherent problem with the system, but they don't. They end up having that obvious truth that everyone pretty much can agree on, except for moderates. But you end up getting kind of kicked into this corner because it affirms your beliefs about distrusting the government, and then you end up, believing Democrats are, harvesting adrenochrome, and then you can look back in the past at all the open files and be like, see, I'm justified. Like, you throw the dart at the dartboard enough times, of course you're going to hit something eventually.
Oh, sure. And to speak to that earlier point you were mentioning about Gremlow, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Is that the name? Okay, cool. So just to speak to... Okay, no, gotcha. All right, no, I just want to make sure I have your name right. To speak to that earlier point, that view of the Clintons in particular is really is also one of the foundations of QAnon as well. The fact that the Clinton, the political dynasty, the fact that these, Bill was in power, and actually not only was Bill in power, but Bill sort of oversaw the beginnings of the unfolding hegemony that is the United States of America. That definitely played into it. I agree that there are critiques to be had about the elites, and it's those critiques that are latched onto by these mass conspiracy theorists, and like you said, sort of played out, drawn out, and misattributed. Yeah.
So speaking of predictive conspiracies, so you're deep in the Q lore. You're like the grand lore master. We've seen over the last 5 years how we can kind of almost predict what the next outrage is going to be within media. It was trans bathrooms, then it was Antifa, BLM, CRT, transgender people again. Where do you see the next big outrage from Q being?
Well, we're already seeing it. It's the backlash against Roe v. Wade reversal. It's the backlash against trying to protect
DC being powered by burning fetuses.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that was something else, wasn't it?
Baby biodiesel is awesome.
But there is a slight.
I wanted to throw my phone out the window. I was so done.
But there is, speaking back to the nugget of truth, there is a slight nugget of truth in that conspiracy theory, in the sense that the furnaces in the hospitals are utilized to sort of supply power back to the hospital, but it's not used. There's not an endless supply of fetuses that are being burned to sort of power the streets of DC. That's ridiculous. And the amount of power that furnace produces is probably incredibly marginal compared to what they pay in gas or whatever else.
So many babies.
Yeah. But it's that, back to that, it's that exaggerated nugget of truth that just gets blown completely out of proportion. But the Roe thing is definitely going to be, we already saw it with the leak. One thing we noticed in particular was the fact that Jews who were speaking up about it were getting targeted specifically with blood libel type narratives. That was a really alarming thing to see. I mean, not because I didn't know that QAnon was anti-Semitic, but just to see the explicit nature of blood libel come out in so many ways it was a little alarming for me. I mean, I know Ghost Ezra has done that quite frequently, and he did it again, but seeing it in other spaces too is just, it's a little alarming. I mean, when you start to jump from implied over to explicit, that's when it starts to get a little
dangerous territory for sure.
Precisely, yeah. So that's in the foreseeable future, that's where I can see it going. That and also gun control, although it seems like the gun control outrage has been going on for decades now. I mean, I'm in Connecticut. I was a senior in high school when Newtown happened, Sandy Hook happened, and that's been sort of an ongoing battle. So definitely, Roe v. Wade is going to be the new BLM, if you will. Like, the backlash against that is probably going to be the new BLM, if you ask me. I don't ask me to see any further than that. I don't claim to be Q. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
We're not worthy of your presence.
Oh yeah.
No, people keep asking me in the chat if I'm Q, but we do have somebody coming on who wrote this book, Taking America Back for God, Christian Nationalism in the United States, at the end of June. And Alex, you may want to tune into this and we can give you the VOD or whatever, but they actually have some really cool QAnon related data, really? Survey data. So yeah. Anyway, sorry. I wanted to do a quick plug for that.
Sure, yeah. No, I'm gonna have to check it out. I haven't heard of that book yet, but I'll definitely look into it. Taking America Back for God, you said, right?
Yep. I'll send you a link to it in your DMs.
Cool, awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, so I have a question that's been asked by a couple of folks in chat. I think some of this may be more, I guess, kind of I don't know how really to phrase it. I guess kind of a downstream take based on your expertise, but based on what you know and sort of like how QAnon adherents really think. If any one of us were to encounter them, either like a family member or a friend, how would you go about at least beginning the process of kind of like either deprogramming them or like trying to get them sort of out of this more like you said, a big tent conspiratorial thinking?
Oh wow, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Because if
been asked that like 20,000 times.
But it's
you gotta start somewhere.
Well, yeah,
sure.
no, I love hearing people's different answers for it because it's always nuanced.
It's something to try.
Yeah.
Well, and this is an age-old question too for just extremism in general, and sort of bring people out of like terrorist movements is the same question that comes up. Like, how do you deprogram somebody from their own beliefs? Without that in general, but also like from a policy standpoint, like how do you do that without infringing on people's rights? Because of course you do have a right to just, think what you want, and you can't police thought, for a personal interaction like that, it's I would say the number one most important thing that you can do is be sure not to alienate them. And I'm sure there's other people out there who will agree with me on that point as well, that, the alienation, that the sort of walls that you put up because of this particular belief system will only drive them further and further into this communities that they're currently experimenting with or are already in. Knowing, and that's not to say that you have to put up with their conspiratorial ramblings or their attacks or anything like that. I've been there. I've definitely been there with some of my own family members in the past. If you have to sort of distance yourself from them because of that, that's okay. You got to take care of yourself. The most important thing is to make sure that they always know that if they're seeking a way out, that they can always come to you and sort of rekindle that relationship without, having to, I think pride is a very important element in there, without having to sort of damage their own pride, without you saying I told you so or any of that stuff. It's very important that you continue to approach them as a human being. If you have the stomach to do so, you can sort of talk through certain conspiracy theories, maybe try to debunk them, with them, not for them, not trying to sort of splain them in any way, shape, or form. Because really with the debunking, debunking is not a very effective anti-conspiracy theory process, if they're open to it, definitely try to do some of that, and talk with them about that. But it's a very individual process. Each person is going to be different. Just like I said, the most important thing is ensuring that those lines of communication can and do remain open, right? And that you're always a person that they can fall back on when they do decide to get out. But it's always going to depend on them, whether or not they're ready to sort of leave this way of thinking, this conspiracy movement behind. That's what it ultimately comes down to. But your role is really to just sort of be that point of contact back to the real world, because without that, they have nothing. I think it was Sun Tzu who said, build a golden bridge that your enemy can retreat over, right? Because if they feel as though they're surrounded and they got their back to the wall, they're going to fight with everything they have just to prove you wrong. So,
yeah, no one wants to find out or come to the realization that they're a rube.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. And that's key. I wish I had more to offer you. There's somebody named Shannon Martinez. She does this sort of thing on the reg. Like, she'll bring people out of extremist movements, and she's, from what I hear and from what I've read, she's incredibly good at it. If you ever wanted to talk that through with an expert, she's the one to go to, for sure.
I was doing some research on my own, trying to figure out like how to decultify someone, and it was interesting.
Doing his own research.
Well, I hate that they stole that. I don't care. I'm reclaiming that word. I'm reclaiming that term. Okay. And it was really interesting because they had a lot of deprogramming, the research done in the 70s and stuff when this was kind of like coming up, and it was really interesting. They had found that basically you need to have someone that is like a trusted member of their family or someone that they've known for a really long time, and kind of like saying, like John, what are you talking about? I've known you for 20 years and now I'm a part of this global cabal. Like, how could that possibly be? And I think that kind of shows why one of the first moves of any cult is to kind of like remove you from your family, remove you from your friends, because it separates you from those people, and then you're able to kind of like, they're able to insulate you. So I totally agree. In these conspiracy circles and stuff, and I just try to ask questions and try to see, like, personally, I'm not trying to change their mind at the beginning or at the end of the conversation. I'm just trying to better understand where they are. And, I've had a couple of people that are like, I think that there's a global science cabal and you're all working together to like make this vaccine dangerous and stuff. But like, you're not you, maybe.
Purposefully not curing cancer so we can make money off the treatments.
Yeah, exactly. But they were like, when I was like, am I one of those scientists? And they're like, no, I think you're one of the good ones. And I'm like, all right, well, that's progress,
Yeah. Well, that's sort of where the out group starts to collapse. Like you can have this idea in your mind about Democrats or about liberals in general. They're the devil, they're baby killers, they're groomers, they're this, they're that. But when it's somebody and somebody you trust for so long who is actually, really a part of that, whatever out group it is, it's much harder to dehumanize that individual in the same way that you've dehumanized all the other people that you don't know. It's really that humanity, that sort of
empathy
brings and empathy that sort of brings them back to earth,
back to reality.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree that and QAnon is very cultish in that way. Yeah, it's got the cult aspect nailed down. I think it's a little bit different than a cult in the sense that there's not a really clear authoritative figure that sort of hands down the bottom line to everybody, right? You do have that authoritative figure, which is Q, but it's not like they're handing down the talking points to everybody else. It's, very interpretive, it's open to interpretation,
So I feel like it's all, I was just gonna say, I feel like it's different from a cult as well, because like the people around them end up doing the isolating for them. I guess. And with a cult, usually I mean, like, yeah, you get that in cults too, but I feel like a lot of the times the cult's like primary thing is like you can't, I don't know how to explain it. I feel like a lot of the time the people that join the cults kind of like self-isolate or isolate halfway, and then their family does the other half. But with Q, it's like, you know, you get tired of talking to someone who thinks everything's a globalist conspiracy, so you end up cutting them off. But
it's tough though, like, because you see this on the QAnon casualty subreddit all the time. They're like, I can't stand this person, I'm cutting him off, I'm not inviting him anymore. And I'm like, damn, like that, I sympathize with that. That must be really hard to live with. But also, like, damn, there's probably nobody else in the world that could probably connect with this person more than this person, and they're just writing them off. And it's just so sad, because it's just like their last fiber connected to reality being cut, and now they're just adrift into this grand conspiracy world. And I feel for both of them, you know. I don't have anyone, I don't know. My family members, if they're in the crazy conspiracy stuff, I don't talk to them. Like, I don't talk to them anyway for them to tell me. So it's kind of hard.
Well, and that's the thing, is like, it's, you know, it's almost like you're dealing with a member of your family who may be addicted to a drug, you know. Like, you obviously need to take care of yourself. You know, you shouldn't destroy yourself for the sake of somebody else's well-being. You know, that's just not sensible. You know, and if that's what you need to do, like, I mean, the QAnon casualties I've seen are, some of them are just god awful. It's like, I had to leave my husband because he was doing this and it was impacting our kids. And, you know, I you know, by all means, do what you have to do to take care of yourself and sort of your well-being, especially your children's well-being too. You know, don't put yourself in a position where you're going to destroy yourself over somebody else's unfortunate beliefs. And no one is gonna fault you for that. As long as you maintain that, listen, if you ever want to come out of this thing, I'll be here for you. But while you are knee deep in this theory, you know, I can't be around you. This is all you talk about. I can't do it anymore. You know, you got to make it very clear as to what your boundaries are. Right. And that doesn't mean you cut them off completely. Of course not. You know, but making clear what your boundaries are is it's a reasonable way of going about it, you know, and that leaves it open for a return.
It's weird, like QAnon, like being a part of QAnon was like kind of part of like this cool club for these people, you know, and all it required was for them to kind of like subscribe and say it, you know, WW1 or whatever it is, you know, and then. But then, like, now there's these weird events, real life events that are coming out that it's like, you better put up or shut up kind of thing. And it's like, it's putting these people out financially in ways that have really never had to do before. Like the Splinter, kind of like the Splinter group in Texas, I think it is, where it's like now these people are spending their life savings doing that stuff. Or, you know, it's like going into deep debt in order to stay out there for months and months and months. And it's like and now like the January 6th and all that kind of stuff too, where it's like these people are having like lifelong repercussions now. This isn't just like a cool Facebook group that you're on. Like they're actually like having like real world consequences. So you're either like the QAnon shaman guy where his lawyer is like, hey, he's out. He's done with this. He doesn't want any part of it now. He feels like he's duped, and whether or not that's real or not, I don't know. But like, what a way to kind of like hit the wall, you know what I mean? Where it's like, you're either doubling down because you don't want to look like a fool, or it's like a good time to like step back and be like, maybe the internet's too much for me right now. Maybe I just need to cool off and Yeah,
and that's exactly what's been happening. You know, you have those people who take the harder route. I think that's a really good way to put it. You're either doubling down or you're taking a step back. That's exactly what happened after Q stopped posting, after January 6th, after Trump was kicked off of social media platforms, and there was the great migration over to what we would call alt tech. Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Or like Queen Romana, you know, and her followers not paying their bills because they believe that they don't have to pay them anymore. Yeah, there are real-time consequences to belief in QAnon. I think that a lot of people don't. A lot of normies, the ones who aren't the researchers, the ones who aren't heavily following the space, they don't really understand or grasp fully, you know, that this isn't just some zany movement where some guy with bull horns is running around the Capitol and because he's stupid or whatever. It victimizes a lot of people, and it's not just the people who fall into the conspiracy theory either. The JFK Jr. crowd, the negative 48 down in Dallas, is an excellent example. You got people who are bringing their kids along, people who are leaving their kids at home, taking all of the money in their savings, quitting their jobs. I mean, this is something that impacts more than just.
Is that still going on down in Dallas? Somebody asked it in chat. I said that basically the intel's sparse these days about Dallas, but are they still down there?
That's a good question. I think they might be. Yeah, I haven't heard anything about it ending. To be honest with you, I think I saw
he popped up at a I call it a QAnon rally, but it's really more like the CPAC kind of stuff. He popped up at one of those events, or maybe it was a Trump event a couple weeks ago. But it looked like I was hopeful because it looked like things may be dying down. So,
yeah, I mean, they definitely died down. I don't think that the crowd that they've sort of developed for themselves in like October, November is still there, like in its full force. I don't think there was ever a time where Protzman in his sacred blue tent there ever said, ever said, all right, it's over. Go home. Like there was never that sort of order. I think it's just sort of dying down. And that 48 and Protzman is actually very much more cultish than the rest of QAnon, if that makes sense. Like they are a lot of the things that they do are very reminiscent of a cult. Like it's not just the average QAnon cultish, you have separating you from your friends and family and sort of bringing you together in this space. It's like incredibly like, some instances it's very demeaning. It's very like they punish you for speaking out of turn kind of deal. And like you said, you give your money to this individual so that way they can maintain hotel rooms for the entire contingent and so forth. Like the Protzman thing was very concerning for a lot of people for that reason. And it's like, what are they going to end up doing? What's their end game to get closer to JFK Jr.? And of course, lots of people decided to make very bad faith jokes about it, but it's a very serious thing. I mean, these sorts of things end in can I'm not saying they will, but they can end in things like self-harm. That was the big worry, and it to a certain degree still is. And of course, it's not just limited to negative 48 either. I mean, if Protzman can do it, there are other members of this community who have the potential to do it as well. In the near future, depending on whatever they decide to organize.
You mean like
around.
A Jonestown kind of thing?
That was the comparison that was being drawn, with a lot of people. Of course, that not in good faith, but that was certainly the fear for a lot of researchers and the butt of a lot of really bad jokes about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that was the primary concern. Is this going to turn into like a worst case Jonestown type of thing? Or what's the name of that one cult that there's
Heaven's
like a
Gate.
cult that
NXIVM?
Heaven's Gate.
Yeah.
Heaven's Gate. Where they were bringing, that's the one where they had the dead woman that they were bringing around with them all sorts of different places, right?
I think
they all drink
they
juice.
thought the alien mothership was flying over Earth and they had to
It was the comet, right?
die.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
right,
the comet.
yeah.
They had to
Hale-Bopp.
die at exactly the right time to
Right.
ascend.
Yes. To get to the spaceship or
Of
whatever.
course,
they-
of course.
that-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
And
I just watched like a really in-depth YouTube video about it like 2 weeks ago, so that's the only reason I know. I know.
Yeah. Well, there's one cult that I'm thinking of right now. A buddy of mine was following them pretty closely. Where there was a woman who was the mother of this particular cult. She had died, so they were bringing her corpse around to various places, and sort of just out of respect or out of worship. And there was children in the group. The love of something.
Love has won.
Love is one. Yeah, that was it. That was
Amy
it.
Carlson was the leader.
Yeah. Yep. That was the woman that they were bringing around with them, and very, I mean, for lack of a better term, just odd practices, I think. But that's the concern. I mean, I don't think they're going to exhume JFK's body and bring him around the United States, but something like that.
They're not doing the dance right. That's why. I mean,
Yeah.
duh.
Well, yeah, a practice that is harmful like that being touted out in front of children and sort of impacting people in ways that have lasting traumatic effects and impacts.
Grum, I know you had a question. Do you?
Yeah,
just wanna ask
so
it?
I was in kind of preparing for the show. Kind of had a thought occur to me, and I don't know if this resonates with anyone, but it seems like a lot of the rhetoric, the kind of older demographics that exist within QAnon, seems like a lot of it is somewhat of a logical conclusion of like Red Scare propaganda, McCarthyism. That a lot of the agents that are working against, God's chosen people, Americans, is part of a communist plot, and it's just translated now into a broader conspiracy theory, a little more layers to the onion.
Oh yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, like communism is a big boogeyman among that movement too. That's their big shtick against liberals in general, is that they're not only are they now groomers and baby killers, but they're also communists. And I think you're right. I mean, I haven't necessarily thought about it in that vein before, but I think you're right. A lot of that old school Red Scare stuff kind of comes to mind. The idea that anybody could be a communist, and like the label of communism, like is so like what is it's like the same thing as being a Democrat in the United States. Yeah, you might be a registered Democrat, but there's so many different.
Or a liberal. That label
right,
gets thrown around for literally anyone who's not on the right.
Right, yeah, or even a conservative. Like any political ideology has nuances to it. It has sort of theoretical branches that come off of it. It's not like this monolith, But of course, the monolith is easier to get people upset. It's easier to sort of organize against when you take a group like the liberals or like the communists, and you sort of wipe away the nuance, which like in a way I guess would wipe away the humanity, the sort of inherent individuality that exists within it, because it's easier to hate that way. It's not like you're going to say, well, I love all of the Democrats that aren't communist. Maybe that's not the best way to put it, but
no, but you're right. It's easier to put people in boxes and hate the people in those boxes rather than like acknowledging the nuance. But I feel like that's also why the right has a much easier time sensationalizing and spreading information, because they do that. And I feel like liberals and leftists, tend to try to avoid that. Not successfully all the time, but try to approach it more nuanced than the right for sure. And we end up, not having as sensational things to, talk about.
It's boring, dude.
So
talking about systems of change.
Interject some sociological theory that what you just described is called labeling theory in sociology. And labeling theory is this perspective about how we apply labels to groups, and then that causes society to react, et cetera, et cetera. So it was cool to hear you say that. If you were in my class, I would give you an A for the day.
5 head.
Nice.
Huge. Wrinkly brain.
Oh yeah.
Does the QAnon space skew in an older demographic? Because it seems like a lot of like the Facebook boomer memes, like a lot of that. Facebook's kind of an older platform now. Is that the case, or am I just kind of reading the tea leaves?
No, I would say so. I think QRRI detailed this in some respect. They detailed sort of the age range that it exists, and it did skew to the older crowd. Yeah.
Well, the reason I ask is because like the Red Scare propaganda, McCarthyism, like that's kind of like where I kind of drew that from. It's like, well, if these are older people and they're accustomed to this conspiratorial thinking, communists are hiding in the trash can waiting to turn you into a Marxist. Well, that seems like that would kind of fit within the experiences they've had growing up.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think so I would put the average QAnon follower somewhere around like my dad's age. So my dad was born in like 68, 69. So maybe by the time he became a little bit more politically active, like the USSR was in massive decline, as was the Red Scare, McCarthyism, and all that. So I don't know if it has like a direct influence in that way. I would be skeptical about applying that mode of thinking, like that
Right.
this idea had a direct influence and sort of carried on through the next couple of decades. But I think that the idea is there. Yeah, I would be open to exploring that sort of explanation and further, for sure, because you're right. It does.
Right.
It's very reminiscent of that.
Right. Well, like the cultural artifacts from like that generational gap are there.
For sure. Yeah. So yeah, and I mean, maybe that's something that they heard from their parents.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past that. Something that they've often heard from their parents. The communists are. Thinking about it a little bit more just right now. Yeah, I mean, you think about like my dad's age. That was the age that communism died. The USSR collapsed in 91. And after that, it was like sort of proof, that America and that democracy and that capitalism had sort of won the day. It was like this great big proof that this was the way of life. This was the system, right? And now that you're sort of trying to, you have this idea where these people, these liberals, are trying to bring communism back. It's like, yeah, I think that would play into it for sure. You're trying to bring back a defunct system because you think it's going to give you more control, and you grew up understanding that communism is inherently just wrong. It's just inherently, yeah, I mean, that's the best way to put it, is that, because of that, you believe that communism is wrong.
Yeah.
And labeling someone in communism, obviously they're wrong. They're the devil. They want to return to, yeah. So
Indoctrination.
precisely. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what QAnon is on its own. It's for sure.
Well, so I mean, on that note, at least like something that I've read with respect to like educational reform, and I think Finland is usually like the model country that gets brought up in what I'm about to say in this conversation. One of the things that they employ from a very young age is the concept of pre-bunking, not necessarily debunking, but sort of like teaching people to get out ahead of like what all was going on with a particular conspiracy theory, or I guess just general area of thought. Letting people know, like, K through 12 education, like, okay, some people are anti-vaccine. Here's generally like the reasons that they have for their position, and here are the reasons why they're not necessarily accurate, and here's kind
that
of like
would
a
never
little...
pass.
Well, I mean, that's a whole separate discussion about the viability of that in the U.S. But I think like where I'm going with this question as it pertains to QAnon would be like, do you think this is something that collectively as a society, whether it's a government agency or a school, or even just individual people and their friend groups, their friends and families, like, is this something we have to like really pay attention to, like make a conscious effort to be like very aware of in our daily life, to get ahead of it, to know what's coming next, to I don't know, maybe stop our boomer parents or something from falling down that pipeline in the first place? Like, does it help to when I talk to my parents every week to be like, oh yeah, by the way, you might see something about this as it pertains to the vaccine or something? Like, what do you think about that general notion? So
what you're just the official term for what you're describing is called inoculation, or attitudinal inoculation, right? Which is, I mean, it's exactly that, right? You're exposing somebody to sort of bits and pieces of that conspiratorial narrative or that extremist narrative, right? And you're exposing it to them, sort of letting them know that it exists and how it might impact them emotionally, how it might bring them in deeper, in order to sort of prevent them from going in, going all in, right? And I think that it is incredibly valuable. The problem with it is that there's no, like, it's hard to do it on a mass scale. Like, you have to, it of course has to, it requires knowledge of the kinds of narratives that people are going to be falling into, right? You need to know, like, what are the narratives that sort of catch people's interest early on, and that's what brings them in. And it's, those narratives obviously have a target population. Like, you can't, like, not everybody's going to be susceptible to the same kind of narratives, right? So it's very particular in that way. And I think it might be a good thing to do just in general, let people know, especially at a young age, about conspiracy theories. This is how a conspiracy theory works, and this is what may bring you into it. But if you really want to build an effective inoculation campaign, you have to, have foreknowledge of what the narrative is and what the group is that's being targeted. So if you know those two things and you think that you can sort of do that effectively, yeah, I would say it's something to try. I mean, it's definitely more effective than trying to pull somebody out that's already in, by far and away. It's like, like catching COVID,
Wouldn't trying to pre-bunk it on a wide scale, like national or like whatever, wouldn't that just give them more reason? Like, you go to 8chan and they'd just be like, yeah, you remember all that shit they taught you in school about these conspiracy theories? Well, they're actually true. Like, I can easily see that being like, the schools were paid by the globalist whatever to teach this so that no one would suspect.
I mean, yeah, I mean that's I could definitely see that happening for sure. But
that's the concerning thing about this is like any action you try to take on it is probably just going to be flipped against you.
And I mean, there are other things that are going to bring people to 4chan poll in the first place, right?
Well, yeah.
It's not just the narrative themselves. I think
right.
Part of that would be the inoculation might actually inoculate people into that particular narrative. Like, there are people out there who are gonna twist this method in on itself and try to make you believe that what we're doing here is part of the conspiracy theory. So you can inoculate against that, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I assume that I'll never be able to predict with 100% certainty, where conspiracy theorists are going to go with their talking points. But yeah, I would say that they're probably going to try something along those lines, and it very may, it may well resonate with people. But it's like strategy, you're not going to be able to save everybody, which sounds horrible, right? I mean, you just don't have the resources, you don't have the time to dedicate, and at the end of the day, it's just not going to work on some people, but something is probably better than nothing. I mean, I know that doesn't sound very hopeful, but I mean, that's the best I got. Attitudinal inoculation is undergoing lots of like research and like testing at the moment. Particularly one guy out of American University named Kurt Braddock is like really into it, and I really like reading his stuff, and I'm excited to see what the outcome of his current research is going to be. I'm interested to see. I think it'll be an effective method. The problem is it'll take 10, 15 years to actually be effective at wide scale prevention. It's not something that we could start doing tomorrow and it's like, oh, we've saved America in like 6 months. It's going to take years and years for us to be able to see the preventative effects of that.
I think so much of, especially having a representative democracy in the United States, like I think so many problems of ours could be filled with just like people getting more involved in the process. Like, I don't know, like we could mandate it 2 years of like public service or something before you go to college, or just people just getting more involved at their local city hall with open committee seats and board seats that are unelected. And you can just like see, you know what I mean? You can just see with your own eyes that like the government isn't run by like this NWO global corporation. It's like, it's actually a lot of people that are just there that are trying to do like good work and stuff like that, and in the same vein, it's not like this, oligarchical like conspiracy either, where everyone's like just slinging money around for, you don't have the oil lobby just coming in giving people money like in person, I guess. It's like, it's just, there's so many, we're so conspiratorial now, I feel like in our I don't know, our media and with the internet.
It's always been like that though.
I agree.
Like
I agree, but I feel like the internet has really allowed people to connect with other people that are conspiratorial, and that grows the conspiracy, faster and easier. Like for example, like, I was talking to this anti-vaxxer, and they were talking how like every single scientist lab is all connected together and they're all a part of this whole thing. And I'm like, but like, who are they? You know what I mean? In my lab, it's like me, I'm a graduate student. There's my PI. We have a postdoc that's from South Korea. Like who out of this group? This is a very small group.
Who's the mole?
Yeah, exactly. Like who, You know, like,
well, right.
So, and if people just had experience with that, and if, Ivory Tower breaks down and people can see the scientific process better, then that's like, there's no room for a conspiracy to grow. Same thing with our civics and stuff.
Yeah, no, and it's not just seeing it; it's engaging with it, being involved with it, right? It's meeting people who are a part of it and sort of working with them toward a collective goal. I think that's actually quite an important part of like counter extremist sort of like programs, is like sort of getting them involved in a community where there's like a collective goal for the greater good, right? I don't think anybody gets involved with like an extremist group or like a conspiracy theory movement because they want to be evil. They want to destroy the world. They want to try to make it better and sort of reshape it within the dynamics of their own beliefs. So I think that's not a terrible. In fact, I think that's an excellent idea. Just trying to get more people involved, not just for the sake of witnessing it in action, but also just being a part of it and just working toward that sort of that greater good. And that's also a great place to get good. What are you doing? I'm sorry, my cat's screwing around with the closet over there, clawing at stuff. But yeah, so just to there's good influences in these programs, and so yeah, I don't think that's a terrible idea at all. It's actually a well trodden part of like CVE currently in other countries. Like the U.S. does not have a robust CVE program. Places like Finland do, Denmark, they call it the Scandinavian approach for that reason. They try to get people involved with their community in some way, shape, or form in order to give them better ideals, sort of get them involved toward the greater good. So,
goddamn Nords, always one up on us.
By the way, Alex, how are you on time? We're more than happy to keep going, but I just want to make sure you're not, missing out on something.
No, if you guys got more questions, I can go till 10 my time. It's probably 9 your time. So I can go for another 20, 25 minutes, no problem.
Sweet.
Cool.
I had another question because you brought up the PRRI data set, and I've kind of been scrolling through it, and I'm kind of looking at the the demographic breakdown of some of the QAnon believers, and to me, what I think kind of catches my eye, and this is a lot of what I focus on since I'm in as a graduate student in higher education. But I see there's a 5% of the QAnon believers have a postgraduate degree. So I think this is going to be like a two-part question for you. One, just in your work in general, have you seen any big credentialed QAnon followers that have like MDs or PhDs or fancy letters after their name that are like kind of prominent in the sphere? And then two, as the follow-up, if so, do you think they are I don't know, I guess more able to radicalize other people into it because of their credentials?
Personally, so specific like QAnon particular, right? Not talking like QAnon adjacent, like the Stu Peters crowd or anything like that. No, I haven't seen personally myself anybody in that. Maybe the I guess, yeah, lawyers would, they're postgraduate for sure. So, I mean, I've seen maybe 1 or 2 lawyers, whether or not they were actually lawyers or not is kind of up for debate. They put it in their Twitter bio or whatever, but their picture was also of like Popeye or, like a blazing Q with wings or something, so it's like, can I say for certain I've seen that? No. Can I say for certain I haven't seen that? No, I don't have the information in front of me to be able to profile every single online individual. It's too anonymous for that. But there are QAnon adjacent people in the cultic milieu itself. I mean, more broadly. Or postgraduate degree people within the cultic milieu itself more broadly. Take Stu Peters' recent documentary, Watch the Water. His primary guest was a guy who had a doctorate in chiropractics. Of
course.
Right. No. And of course he was selling his, multivitamins and his merchandise, which is something I didn't know that chiropractors did.
I don't know if
regularly.
Chiropractors really can.
Well, they should talk to Dr. Brian Artis because he seems to be a master at, merchandising the conspiratorial chiropractic circle. But yeah, I mean, there
What a
are
strange niche.
right? No, but that niche does exist. You know, like there's a need for this sort of pseudo academia that supports anti-vaxxing, that supports snake venom in the water, for God's sake. You know, like that you need somebody with authority.
So hot right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, but that, that's what you need, is you need somebody to support that. To also pastors, for example, like that have higher degrees, higher education, and like theological subjects that also comes to mind. I know there's more than a few QAnon pastors that I can't think of off the top of my head right now, but it's highly likely that, yeah, they do have education beyond the bachelor's degree in some theological topic, So I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I don't think conspiracy theories. I mean, is education like a bulwark against conspiracy theories? I would say yeah, but just because one has higher education does not mean they're automatically trained to think in a way that's antithetical to conspiracy thinking in and of itself. Sometimes it can help that along if they're not careful. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So,
I've seen it happen all too often.
Yeah, and it's sad. Or like, I remember seeing one professor from NYU. It was a professor from NYU whose name I can't think of right now, but he was part of hosting like a rally outside of New York over January 6th political prisoners. That what the hell was his name? They were wearing like the Never Again, like the Holocaust remembrance sort of buttons, but they were trying to basically say that, yeah, they were basically, this was like over the past summer, not this, the last summer, basically trying to say that like these January 6th prisoners were equivalent to victims of the Holocaust, which of course was, is
so offensive.
It's absurd, I mean.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess if you don't believe the Holocaust is real, then I guess I don't know.
Yeah,
that is not.
I mean,
Mark Crispin Miller, that's his name.
Yes,
Jeez.
Crispin Miller. Yes. And he spoke at this conference, and he was echoing much of the same QAnon adjacent talking points as anybody else. So they do exist in the cultic milieu, and it's scary to think about. Yeah.
Are there things that we can learn from QAnon and conspiracies in general that we can use for like the greater good? Because I, like, for example, for like science communication, that's kind of like why I'm here. I'm a scientist trying to communicate cool things that are happening in science. And like, I see whenever the QAnon are like they're always trying to share something on Facebook or something like that. You see the same pictures shared multiple areas, and it's always a picture. It's not a link. It's always like a picture. So I kind of like ascertain from that, I need to make like infographics or ways of condensing dense information down so that like people can easily share it on social media, text messages and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of like, that was my conclusion from it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah, pictures are worth 1,000 words, to quote the old saying, obviously. I mean, memes are such a powerful way of communicating broad and maybe not so explicable ideas. Like it's a way of communicating a frame to people. And in a political environment, frames are so much more important than facts. So much more important. I mean, it's, you have a particular frame about a topic, and somebody comes in and gives you a fact that totally refutes that entire frame that you've spent so much time in your own head building from scratch. You're going to take that one fact and you're going to treat it like it just doesn't exist, or it's a statistical anomaly, or it's erroneous. It doesn't matter. Or that's that's sort of the more extreme, is that it just doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm not going to throw out my entire house of ideas here to accommodate that one little brick that you're trying to fit in. And that's really what memes do, is they communicate frames in that way. So I would say, yeah, I mean, it's important to sort of master that art of the frame. The problem is that a lot of QAnon's frames are based on bad faith questions. You know, and those bad faith questions will lead to, it's what leads to the sort of narrative splurge, the diversity of narratives that emanate from the space. It's just the fact that it's so, it's just a lot of bad faith questions. So I don't think that anything good will ever come from bad faith questions. It's like somebody like Tucker Carlson bases his entire show off of bad faith questions. It doesn't matter who they have as a guest. That guest will, so many bad faith questions emanate from there. And that's why it resonates with Q followers, I think. It's just the fact that it's the same tactic. I think Greg meant more like tactics, like sharing images instead of articles or paragraphs, or I don't know if I'm misinterpreting, but I feel like that's
I think that's a framing, like, I think that's a good point too, is like, if we're going to make an infographic about something, you got to have like the big picture view, and then have that be the first thing that catches people's eye, and then drill down into maybe different things that you could find with like different infographics or graphics or, I don't know, figures. I don't know, it's just like I have a couple like ideas for some, and it's just hard to. There's so much information, especially in the academic space. It's hard to actually construe it, and you really have to cut so much out. And you don't want to. You don't want to be bad faith. You know what I mean? You don't want to put something out there where it's like, okay, there's actually this caveat though in this particular spot, but like none of these Q ones are it, right? It's like it's always these circle, red circle, green circle, and then linking them all together, and then there is some like choose your own adventure kind of part of these larger infographics that are being put out there too. So you're kind of like you're like discerning it too. You're like, oh, what's in there? So I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't put that in there. Maybe I should. I don't know. So somebody we could probably learn a lot from is I'm sure you're all familiar with Frank Luntz. The father.
Yeah. Oh my God.
The father of the so-called death tax, climate change, the name climate change. I mean, Obamacare. This method of framing is so effective that it dominates. It's dominated the narrative for the past 20 years. I mean, the things that man comes up with ends up becoming the way that even Democrats will frame it, like Obamacare.
Exactly,
that was a conservative framing, and it now it's just how we refer to the damn thing.
And I think the cool thing that to think about from QAnon is that QAnon kills the Frank Luntz focus group. That Frank Luntz is how it was before algorithms, before algorithms chose the content. I think the idea with QAnon and Trump and what Kushner did with Cambridge Analytica, they put out thousands of different types of different materials too, different sizes, different colors, different things highlighted, all that kind of stuff, and they put 1,000 of them out there. And then they just saw what one people clicked on. And then you're kind of focus grouping it while you're doing it. And then you see, okay, this specific, number 47, that's the one that we go with. And then that's what we add by for all these other places. Because they didn't know, right, when they were trying to go and focus, they're trying to target, specific areas and like, Philadelphia or something. It's like, what ads work there? Well, I don't know. The old way of doing it is like, let's get the Frank Luntz focus group of all these people, the demographic that lives there and all that kind of stuff. But no. Cambridge Analytica is like, let's do it with the algorithm. Let the algorithm decide.
Yeah, and just social media and just the internet in general have made that so much more effective and possible. And that's why, like what you were saying, somebody was saying earlier, how there's always been conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorism within politics. It's not a new thing at all. What's new is the way that they're amplified using these sort of sophisticated algorithms and using the intense connectivity of the internet is that's the new part, and that's what's really making the difference here. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a big problem, and it's not a problem we can just analyze from one angle. I mean, I analyze it from the QAnon angle, and the QAnon has so many different things going on at one time. But really, the broader conservative right and even the global right is just there's so many angles that are contributing to what is essentially the same thing, which is a recession of democracy.
Hasn't like QAnon talking points, haven't they like started popping up in other countries, like especially the UK? I've noticed a lot of it. Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like, yeah, UK has a lot of it. France with the yellow vest. Germany has a robust QAnon community. As far as actual offline activity, the second highest QAnon connected crime rate. Anybody guess where the second highest QAnon crime rate is besides the United States? QAnon connected
Canada?
crimes.
Argentina.
UK.
Nope. The Netherlands.
Damn.
Believe it or not.
What?
Yeah. The
They're kind of
Netherlands.
having a white supremacist arc right now, aren't
Yeah.
they?
A little bit.
The
That's
Nordic
right.
countries.
The Netherlands is the second highest QAnon connected crime rate. It's only a fraction of the United States. So like the US has probably 100, give or take, crimes connected to QAnon. The Netherlands has about a quarter of that, 25, I believe, is what they're up to. So it's
It's like our gun violence stats.
Oh yeah, and that's sad too. But like, and it's not just Europe. It's not just the West. There are other places that you wouldn't expect. Like, this is harder for me to track from an open source perspective. But there is one like.
We're good. We're good.
So.
We were all like,
SM7T.
save the liquor.
Luckily, it was empty.
That's the crucial part, is saving the
Yeah.
liquor, of course.
You can tell it's empty because that happened.
It's just so the subject was so intense. He just throws his hands.
Yeah.
Holy
shit!
God damn it, Netherlands!
damn it!
First you have healthcare, now you
Not the white
beaten us.
supremacist arc.
So, and this is the greatest insight I've ever had into it was like Queen Romana Didulo of Canada put out like this message asking her followers, like, where do you come from? And of course there were a lot of the standard answers that you'd expect. Australia is a big one, of course. You're saying UK, Netherlands, Germany, France, a lot of European country. Italy is another one. But then I was seeing places, like Central Africa, Mozambique, Sri Lanka, off of the Indian subcontinent, Israel. Of all places for an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory to thrive, you're telling me Israel? I mean, it really
I guess
is.
they mask it enough that it could not be.
Well, yeah.
You really wanted it to not be, but
I mean, if I could get a Hebrew speaker, we could do one hell of a research project with QAnon in Israel. I mean, it's just such a fascinating.
If you're really interested in that, I can hook you up, my friend.
Yeah,
It's like
that'd be
those.
great.
It's like those. Like the Hispanic people or Latino people in the white supremacist organizations, where it's like, "What are you thinking?" And they get interviewed, and they're like, "Hey, just in case, right? Maybe I can make it. I don't know." And you're like,
one of my
"You're not
viewers
going to get into the white
linked me-
supremacist white colony. Like, you're
No,
not going to make it."
one of my viewers linked me a video of a black cab driver who wore a Nazi armband while he was driving his cab, and like got asked about it by reporters, and he was like,
Jesus.
"No, it's the National Socialists." Like,
Yeah.
it's
I
yeah,
remember
I know,
that.
Marcus. Yeah. But
So,
that was just like oh my god.
Yeah, what's Enriqueo? What's his name? The leader of the Proud Boys there.
Exactly.
Yeah, Tario.
Exactly.
Yep.
Tario, right, yeah.
The FBI informant.
Same thing. I mean, he's he's the leader, the chapter national leader of when we get down to brass tacks, a white supremacist movement. I mean, that's a fascinating, but it's not I wouldn't say it's understudied. I mean, there are people who look into the sort of those dynamics. That's something that I haven't exposed myself to quite a lot, although I'm very interested in getting into it. But yeah, it's very interesting. That sort of I don't want to say hatred, but I mean, it almost seems that way.
It's like I can't be me kind of thing. Oh, not me though.
I'm one
I'm
of
a
the
good.
ones.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
It's like Blair
exactly.
White on YouTube, like shitting on other trans people, saying they're not trans enough, and being like having these conservative talking points and interviewing with conservative people. So she's one of the good ones.
Good old
Right,
gatekeeping.
yeah.
Good old
Yeah.
gatekeeping.
I always thought Uncle Ruckus from the Boondocks was like some funny joke, but apparently it's a thing. Yeah,
There's a history there.
yeah, I
I did not expect Uncle Ruckus.
I love the Boondocks. It's one of my favorite shows of all time.
It's such a good show.
I love it.
My husband made me watch it. Oh my god, I just wasn't expecting the Uncle Ruckus reference.
No,
Have you just discovered the Boondocks, Amber?
No. This was years ago.
Oh,
like
okay.
when we first started dating, he was like, "You need to watch this show. You would really like it.
Yeah.
You would really like it because I'm leftist liberal cuck."
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, the first episode just gets right away. You don't tell white people the truth. What's the matter with you? You never tell white people the truth. And he's smacking them, and it's so. I mean, it's so. It's great.
It's unapologetic in its coverage of those topics, and I loved it.
Yeah, Aaron Ruber, the creator, he is incredibly based.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you. This is more like kind of angling towards wrap up, but I've had my head in the Quniverse for a really long time, and literally had to just say, nope, I'm taking a break for a while. What in the hell do you do to like detox? Because this stuff really like gets inside your head.
Drink. No, okay, maybe a little bit. I don't know. Up until my lung collapsed while I was interning for the UN, and I was getting really involved in this space and just seeing how
awesome.
horrible this all was.
Not the collapse on the UN. Sorry.
Oh no, yeah. I used to smoke a lot of weed and cigarettes that was sort of like my coping mechanism beforehand, and it got really bad after January 6th, and I sort of went through like a death of innocence moment, and these days I don't know. I think for me it's easier, as a straight white. I mean, not
cishet,
right? Yeah,
not
incredibly Christian, but I was raised in a Catholic family, and this kind of stuff is not incredibly detrimental to myself. It's detrimental to the people that I love. I mean, sisters, and I have friends of various, ethnic and religious backgrounds, and this is very detrimental to the people outside of my space. But and somebody who I sort of look up to, is a little bit of a role model, once said to me that you got to use your privilege in a way that's going to make a difference for the people who don't have it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of just the underpinnings of it. I mean, otherwise, there are times where I have to disconnect, and I don't answer DMs for a while. I don't answer mentions. I don't answer emails. I kind of try to unplug, and I'll go play Xbox, or I'll have a couple of beers.
Touching grass.
Touching grass, yeah.
No, dude. No, it's eat grass, blow trees. That's the order. Everyone gets it wrong.
Go out there and roll around in it. But at the end of the day, I think about how this is much more detrimental to somebody who isn't me, and maybe that's a sort of a narcissistic way of looking at it. But I use that as fuel. I use my privilege of being able to sort of stomach this kind of stuff to sort of work through it. I mean, this past week, especially you have Buffalo, and now you have Uvalde. This past 2 weeks have been kind of taking a toll on me. I'm looking forward to a sort of a long weekend of sort of decompressing. And there's also I've been a Boy Scout leader in a scout troop for a couple of years now. That's being able to work with those kids and do something a little bit more hands-on and outside of this space, and being able to educate them to be good citizens and good young men, and now women. Now we have young women in the organization as well. That really sort of relaxes me and brings me back to sanity. When I move to DC, hopefully I'll be able to link up with another troop like that, because it really does. It really brings me back to center. So,
that's way cool.
You get to rub elbows with the DC GOPers on the weekends if you're out there doing scout troop stuff.
Some of the scout dads, I gotta say, are very they try to get into it with me, and I'm like, dude, I'm
trust me, I'm a weebelo. I know all about it.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Oh man, so
just an inside scouts joke between
Dude, it's so prevalent here.
So cute.
Like every Mormon boy will go through Boy Scouts. They will all be Eagle Scouts. I live in Utah, but that's extremely prevalent here.
Oh yeah, we used to have a Mormon troop who came to our summer camp every summer. No, I'm not even kidding. They would. So check-in used to be on Sunday, and they would roll in Monday morning because obviously Sunday is their, and it was very. It was a very interesting sight to see. I knowing like what I know about Mormonism to a like sort of a removed degree. It was interesting to see in real time. I didn't think that we would ever have one come up to New England of all places, but I mean, that's what it is.
Sorry, that was just hilarious phrasing. It was great. They're all over the place. They're everywhere.
Oh, great.
They out here.
They out
Mostly
here.
Yeah, already. So it looks like it's just hitting 10 East Coast time. So, Alex, I think that's where you wanted to wrap up. So I guess with that being said, obviously, like this would be the time if you got anything you want to plug, any causes you want to shout out, go ahead and just take the next little bit of time to do just that.
First of all, obviously, I want to thank all of you for having me on today. I always love coming on and sort of sharing my incredible scatterbrain with everybody. I hope it was all coherent, and I hope it answered your questions sufficiently. If not, disclaimer, I don't know what else to say. Shout out to everybody out there who's interested in the space. Shout out to everybody who's going through it right now. It's been a rough couple of weeks, a rough couple of months, and I know things maybe don't look so hopeful all the time, but I mean, keep the hope up, man. I mean, without that, we're nothing. Thank you guys, and thank your viewers and anybody else who needs thanking. Just thank you for being you. And you can find me on Twitter. You just type in Alex Mandela if you want to follow me. If not, I won't take it personally. That's all I really have to say. So thank you very much, everybody.
And thank you. Chad is definitely saying this is one of their favorites for this Twitch broadcast that we've done with you being here. So they certainly like you, and they're also saying at some point they want you back. So I think at some
everyone
point,
loves Alex.
Oh no,
the door's open if you ever want to come back.
I'd be happy to. It'd be my pleasure. So
I'm gonna listen to that podcast.
Yeah, I was about to say, Amber, you've been listening to QAnon Anonymous.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
I literally just typed in QAnon in Spotify and just clicked the first thing that popped up. I had forgotten the name of the podcast that Professor Q told us, but now that I know it, I'm going to listen to that one because obviously it's superior.
Yeah. Well, Travis View and his crew are great. If you want another good one, you guys can look up the Loopcast too. In the next couple of weeks to months, QOrigins project, the whole project is going to be on the Loopcast. So when that comes up, cool. I'll forward you guys the link. And all right.
Thanks.
Well, I guess this is where I sign off. So thanks again, everybody, and it's been a pleasure being here, and I hope to be back soon. So, all right.
Thank you, and I'll see you soon.
All right, see you, Chris. Bye.
Alrighty, that was cool. That was fantastic.
That was fun. Yeah. Very informative. Holy shit.
He's awesome.
Oh yeah, those guys are great.
I forgot to ask him if he fucks around with Braze Belden.
Oh, well, it sounds like there might be another opportunity, Grandma.
That's QAnon Anonymous.
Oh, okay, cool.
So what I was saying before, to do a shameless plug, before Alex came on, was I finished up my newest ad.
Oh, nice.
Oh, shit.
I saw that.
Yeah. You guys want to see it?
Roll it.
Okay. Let me know if chat can see this.
Here, hang on. There might be... Give me a second to pull up video, because there might be screen sharing ability within it.
Oh, shit. Danny
okay, hang
DeVito.
On. Don't play it yet. I can add it on a stream, so give me just a moment.
Okay.
Browser.
We're evolving with the technology. This is great.
Add, and then let me... Hang on.
Evolution never stops, Professor Q.
Hang on.
The student becomes the master. I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't know if the audio is going to play through video. It might. So hang on. Let me do this. I'm just going to cover up stream with it real quick. All right, go ahead and let her rip.
Okay.
I can't hear it.
You can't hear it?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Hang on, let me actually... Yeah, because it's got a sound source within VDO. Let me see. Give me 1 second.
Sorry, I got this totally screeched to a halt.
No, you're good. You're good. I mean, this is actually kind of helpful to like fuck with the technology a little bit to tweak its features. Because I see adding to scene. Yeah, because basically, like when you added the screen share, it basically made it as like another guest. So yeah, it's almost like it's not like coming up with native sound. It's like coming up muted by default, even though it has like a volume slider. It's not actually like registering as something with volume to play. Oh, that's interesting. Hang on,
That's
maybe
okay. If we can't do it, it's all good.
Yeah, let me just browse through some of the settings real quick. 'Cause I think there might be like an enable screen share if it's not enabled already. That's screen share IDs. Yeah,
Should have asked Alex if Q has had any recent recent talks about like Uvalde with the recent shooting.
Standard false flag stuff. So it's kind of like the same.
Yeah, and then there was that trans woman they blamed the attack on.
Dude, people will jump to any excuse to try and like dox trans people. It's wild.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, before we go down that rabbit hole, Grumlow, if you send me the ad, like the actual file, I'll run it after the panel.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we'll just do that. Here, I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, no worries. You guys continue. Sorry. Yeah, man, do we want to talk about Uvalde? Because that's certainly something we could.
If we do.
Yeah, I did it all day. I don't think I can dive super deep into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't blame you. So I mean, I guess I'll propose to the panel. Do we want to cut it here? Is there any other non-Uvalde related topics we want to hit up while we've got the five of us chilling?
Grumlow, has there been any news on the Louisiana contraceptive abortion bill that they were shoving through?
Yeah, it was voted down. They are,
thank God.
Yeah, they're trying to get a newer version of it through. It was shot down under the guise of it wasn't like the wording in it was too wasn't appropriate or something like that. So it's shut down for now, but in the future they'll try.
Oklahoma governor signs bill that bans most abortions at the point prohibits abortion at the point of fertilization. So all
well, I have news. So chat knows we got a major banging lineup coming up. So June 2nd, Smite Night. June 9th, we've got Dr. Jennifer Miller, who's recently published a book on LGBT storybooks. Then we've got Dr. Gregor Madison from Oberlin College coming, whose research is on gay bars. And
do we get to talk to him about the handkerchief thing?
Oh, absolutely. You can ask this guy anything. He's great. He's fabulous. June 23rd, we've got Dr. Andrew Whitehead and Dr. Samuel Perry talking about white Christian nationalism. And July's shaping up to be actually pretty cool too. So,
hell yeah. Any word from that
the future guests?
Yep.
Yeah, and I know one of the people that I'm going to reach out to. I want to kind of give him a little bit of time to decompress himself, since he just defended his dissertation. But one of my favorite Twitter follows ever, Kevin Bird, the Bird Maniac on Twitter. He's not an ornithologist. No, that's just his little name, Kevin Bird. But he's one of the, I think, leading, if not the foremost, like anti-racist academics. And he spends his time like yelling at the Steven Pinkers, Charles Murrays, whatnot, online. But he certainly, I think he was on whatever podcast that like Matt Leck runs, talking about how a lot of that started. So I want to reach out to him because I've talked to him about unrelated stuff before, and try and get him on so we can have a whole like biological essentialism episode, like really kind of like lore behind it, not just, you know, debunking of the biology, because, you know, that takes 30 minutes, but sort of like how this came to be and what we do about it in terms of future directions.
Yeah, I'm trying to get in touch with Talia Lavin, author of Culture Warlords. It's about online political radicalization, but no dice just yet.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know how much of a help I can be to this. That's kind of, I think, why I've been letting Professor Q kind of take the reins in terms of the credentialing. But it always seems a little bit more legitimate when it's like, hey, faculty member at college wants you to be here. So I don't know if I can help you in that respect. If I can, let me know.
Yeah,
I'm always happy to help. Honestly, I always think grad students have an easier time, because whenever I get an email from a grad student, I'm like, you're a poor, oppressed person. I should help you.
The pity interview.
I mean,
well, I think that's because you have like a soul. You know, I think some of the other people that we email are like, a peon. Why are they not in the laboratory? They're able to send emails. What the fuck? How did they get out of the handcuffs that chained them to the bench? Get back to work. Like,
who let the undergrads out of the garage?
Literally, dude. It's that, but like also you're responsible with coming up with your work too.
Right.
Do we want to tell Chad about the article we're working on, Marcus?
Ooh, yeah. I don't know. Was it just the conversation that you pitched it to, or have you pitched it to any of the other outlets we were kind of...
So I just pitched it to conversation, and they said no. But
I mean, that's
we're going to get it out.
Really, they really don't want to converse, assholes.
So, well, there's a reason for that, and they want us to write stuff on our own research. But anyway, Marcus and I have got this really cool article that's going to come out and be online soon on like race science and the kind of stuff that he was just talking about. So we'll definitely be getting that out to folks when it is available.
Yeah, and I know that's at least my way of trying to like pay homage to, you know, Kevin Bird and his crew who are, you know, in genetics, trying to like stop the abuse of genetics for white supremacist purposes. So hopefully this article will go somewhere. I mean, we could try Salon again, but there are a couple of other outlets that I'll at you about in Discord.
Yeah.
Amber, were you saying something?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Amber.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I like, up until a couple days ago, I was like dead set on going to grad school, and then a couple days ago, I had this existential crisis of, holy shit, I'm gonna be stuck in like 6 or 8 years of $30,000, and that was like so because I'm still living in my parents'. The housing market is a mess, but I'm still living in my parents' basement, and that was like really, like, I don't know why I made the mistake of looking at industry jobs that I could get right now. And I was like, oh my God.
I mean, you can always finish your education and later, right?
Yeah, but it's really hard to get back once you've left.
Once you get a taste for salary.
Yeah, I talked to my PI about it, and he like was just shitting on grad school. And I walked out of his office and I was like, I want to do grad school. So yeah, I don't know what that means, but
yeah, like it's an investment like anything else. I mean, I think what a lot of the actual like
and
labor
I'm not in it for the
focus.
money, so I don't know why that hit me so hard. But,
Well, but like it should
really
also be like fairly compensating you for your labor. Like, you know,
Right.
it's one of those, what do they call it? I think they call it a passion trap where, you know, you don't do it because you make money, you do it because you love it, but that's exploitation. I mean, taking
Right.
advantage of your passion for contributing to society in a particular way to pay you fucking Parmesan breadcrumbs is exploitation. And there's a massive fucking movement right now. I'll have to dig up the Twitter thread right now, but like some crusty old faculty member in biology somewhere was like, I'm trying to recruit postdocs and I can't find any. Where's all the PhD grads going? Well, nobody wants a job in academia. It was like the science version of like, nobody wants to work. What the fuck?
Yeah, no one wants a job in academia because it pays
like shit.
breadcrumbs.
And literally he was getting ratioed like a
Unless you're a
motherfucker
PI.
by grad students.
Yeah, unless you
Like,
run
all
your
the-
own lab,
yeah.
unless you like are a PI or run your own lab, and even then, you're not like guaranteed good money. But at least that's like the best avenue to make good money.
Well, but like this guy in particular, he had money. He had money up the wazoo. He was like, I got money. I got spaces. Like, where are all the people wanting to go into academia? And everyone
and
was
my
in his
PI
replies
told
like,
me-
no, people don't want to fucking do that.
My PI told me that like the amount that they pay postdocs is based off the NIH, and they don't want to go too high over what the NIH says they should be paid because then, you know, capital, profit. But that's what he explained it as, and I was like,
Well,
Okay.
the NIH regulation for how much you have to pay postdocs, I think the recommended minimum is $42,000 a year, which is really not all that much above a grad student, number one. And number two, being a postdoc is another 3 to 5 years of like being in some sort of like training abyss where you're like grad school plus, where you just fall through the fucking cracks and somehow you magically come out the other side like a faculty member ready to produce in academia. Like it doesn't really add all that much to your training in reality. Like it's literally 3 to 5 years dedicated for you to grant write and try and beg for money. That's what a postdoc actually is. And
That's
so
like
like
starting pay for a public school teacher in Louisiana.
yeah, like
Yeah.
for
with a PhD.
5 to 6 years of going to grad school with a PhD, maybe even spent more time before getting a master's. Like that amount of sacrifice in terms of time should translate to a hell of a lot fucking more, even as a postdoc, than $42,000 a year. And on top of that, there are PIs who will try to pay less than the minimum. They will say that's too expensive. Part of it because they don't have that much money because nobody's funded, but also because they're just being cheap. They're being exploitative bosses. They don't want to pay you a living wage because that's more money from their coffers they have to give you. So that's why people are fleeing to industry in droves. And that's what that Twitter thread was all about.
Yeah, and postdocs are also like usually the first to get cut when someone loses funding because they make more than the lab tech or the grad student or whatever.
Yep.
They're expendable.
Exactly. Yeah, they're
all
like
are.
you said, they're more expendable than a grad student because the postdoc is supposed to be generating their like body of literature and their grants to stand alone. Like they aren't necessarily solely tied to a laboratory project that's ongoing. Like they kind of got their own shit going on, so they're the first one to get the boot. And that's why you actually see a lot of industry like companies taking advantage of that shit. They're making basically industry PhDs and industry postdocs where you can do your entire PhD working for pharma or biotech. And that's like your project that you defend, which is scummy because then you're just, you know, letting private industry exploit grad school on top of academia exploiting grad school.
Well, in
but
research
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to add on to that. Like the industry postdoc is becoming super popular because like other places where academics can get hired after their PhD are like viewing that as like valid work experience. And when you're doing an industry postdoc, you don't get paid $42,000. You get paid a hell of a lot more than that. So,
I mean, 42 was a little more than what I was getting paid for my first job out of grad school. So this angry look on my face all the time while I don't smile. I've been through
but
some
also,
shit.
when was that? Because like wages
20
have not.
How old do you think I am?
I don't know. I mean, like,
2015.
but the
2015.
economy after COVID has been like completely spiked. Like everything's way more expensive now than it was before. That's, I guess, that was my point. Not that you're old. I was saying like post COVID or during COVID, like everything got way more expensive, especially housing.
I'm doing my usual interjecting some levity into. I know you didn't, but you know, but yeah, you're right. I didn't think about the whole inflation thing really messing with grad students a lot, and you're totally right. Yeah.
I mean, the reason why that I went back to academia after having a job in industry is, I mean, your earning potential after grad school shoots up, you know? So let's say I was making, I think it was like 46 a year at, as a research associate 2 in San Diego. I'm making 36 right now. It's because I have funding. So normally it would be like 23, 24, I think, if I'm just TAing. So let's say I'm losing out on $20,000 a year and lost potential, right? So that's $100,000 that I'm losing that I could have if I stuck with my research associate position. Well, I mean, people with just a undergrad degree, there's a glass ceiling. I mean, you're not going to be able to get into those CSO, CTO, CEO positions. And I mean, unless you're like a part of like the founding members of the company, then you maybe do. And if that's the case, then it's a really small biotech. And if it ever goes under, you're never going to be able to say like, oh, I was the CSO of this like biotech with like 30 people in it. Now I'm going to be competitive for like a CSO or a CTO position at Illumina. That's just never going to happen.
That's kind of the main reason I want to do grad school, because I feel like I would thrive under like management or leadership position. And you really can't get that in STEM unless you have a PhD. Like, yeah, it's like you said, there's definitely a glass. Like you might be able to get to low management with a bachelor's, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'll tell you what, man, I mean, I guess we're supposed to do like a jobs in science episode. And I think that we should, but I think that, you know, a lot more and more people are kind of like not doing postdocs. I feel like more and more people are kind of just going straight to industry. I think that's normal, you know, pretty normal. The numbers support that. I think it's like 0.1% of people that start a PhD actually go and become a professor afterwards. It's so incredibly small. There's just no way.
The PhD that's in my lab like has worked in the lab for like 6 months after he got his PhD, and now he's going to a startup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just not, there's not enough universities that are opening. It's just doesn't exist. So it's just kind of the reality of the scenario. And I think like professors and universities are kind of like realizing this, hopefully. At least the universities are, right? The universities actually have a huge monetary incentive to spin off companies from these patents. And, a professor wants to make a startup based off of their patents if you're in bio and stuff like that. But certain parts of bio, right? Like you can't. I read this amazing paper that basically discovered an extinction event of sharks and oceanography and stuff like that, marine biology. And I'm like, that's one of the best papers that I've ever read. It's like, that's not going to get a patent. That means nothing. Like, it's like, damn, man, that's so, that just sucks, man. That just sucks. Like, how can we prioritize one type of research over another? But we do at universities, and because they can patent things. And that's kind of like, I mean, in the 80s, they changed that.
That's why.
Yeah, Reagan changed that. That was kind of like they assigned a law that basically allowed universities to start like owning patents. And that kind of, in my opinion, that's kind of the domino that impacts a lot of where we're seeing problems right now. But I mean, for education wise, I mean, it's really hard, especially in STEM, in hard sciences, you can go and actually get paid to get a PhD. In a lot of soft sciences and stuff, you can't do that. You're actually paying, you're actually having a second job, you're working and TAing and researching at the same time, which is just crazy to me. And I think that like you're investing in yourself, right? You're becoming a better scientist. You're learning how to use these new things, these new instruments that you never would have gotten a chance to in industry. So it is what you make out of it. A lot, undergrad is like, it's good, but like really your grad school is whatever you make out of it. If you're just going to coast and just have, you know, a really bad PhD experience, you're going to have a really bad PhD experience. But if you try to apply yourself, try to learn things, it can be very rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you kind of have to like go into it wanting to get like certain transferable skills out of it. Like kind of my approach is just trying to be as broadly marketable as possible. So if I want to like, you know, seize the day and, you know, there's an opening in one particular facet, whether it's industry or government, like I want my skill set to be like, okay, I could step into a specific pair of shoes.
Yeah,
So,
that's how I kind of am approaching it too, is like applicable to either academia or industry, because it'll probably end up being industry, but like you know what I mean? But
yeah, so just look at umbrella programs. That's going to be your best bet, because those are going to give you the most, I think, like broadly applicable skills. You know, if you want to do a lot of stuff that's very applicable in various areas of biology, you know, I'm biased, but microbiology will be transferable just about fucking anywhere.
well, so the way that the university I'm at does it is they have an umbrella program and then you go into a specialty after doing rotations. So
I mean, yeah, that's
so
kind of what
you-
mine did. Yeah.
yeah, so you start out with like molecular, cellular, and evolutionary biology, and then you pick a subject or specialization or a lab. Basically, whatever lab you end up in ends up picking your specialization. So
Yeah, I mean, we could probably talk about that more off stream, just in terms of like, you know, the techniques to like hone in on in particular, because that probably wouldn't be the most riveting content. But
no.
all of that to say, like, I think Greg and I are, again, we're both biased, but like a lot of the shit that we pick up in microbiology based training of any kind is going to be like super applicable. So that's a discussion I think the three of us and maybe Professor Q, if you want to hop in on that too, like the most STEM lordy conversation possible. We could
How to become a STEM lord. But we
Or
are
a STEM lady.
we are
Or
gonna
a STEM NB bestie.
I mean,
I've
there was
heard
a
the term stem cells recently, and I
Oh.
find that so hilarious.
No.
I'll take it.
I'm gonna start using that. That's
I'll take-
dude. That's David Sabatini. He's a stem cell.
They're
Oh
gonna
my
become
god.
phrenologists.
That's beautiful. I think we did have like a, what was it, like the science jobs, or like something in the you guys were just talking about it the last couple of days. I'd be down to talk about that. I think that there's a lot of like good questions and stuff, like why to go to grad school, what's the point of going grad school, you know, but
I ask myself that question every day. What was I thinking?
I
I mean,
watched like 20 YouTube videos about
dude,
it. because
like,
I was
it's
in
so
the middle
funny,
of an
like, my
existential
friends-
crisis.
my friends
So
that
let
are
me-
like
let me-
my friends that
delve
are
this back
have a
little
PhD
bit.
are the ones that are the most anti-grad school, but then now they're like, they have like jobs like 200K, 500K a year, and they're the ones that bagging on grad school. And I'm like, bro, you would never have had the CSO position at a
Exactly,
cannabis
that's the
company
position I'm
making
in.
500K a year, and you're telling me that a PhD sucks? Like, shut up! Like, it's like,
Well,
what are
I
you
don't
talking
care-
about?
I don't care about the money. It was just like really being like, I want to be told that the time that you invest is worth it. That's all I was looking for. And yeah, my PI was like just shitting on it, and it just apparently made me want to do it more. But like, maybe that says something about me. I'm just
You do it out of spite. You want to.
I'm a contrarian
There you go.
bitch.
Hell yeah.
So what I'll tell you, just from my perspective, is getting a PhD opens a hell of a lot of doors, and I'm so surprised. Like, I take for granted that I have access to certain things that I do, because most of my life has just been me bumbling around and figuring shit out as I go.
Yeah.
But you know, like, it's gotten me jobs in government, it's gotten me jobs at university. You know, I had that interview at Facebook, so you know, I could have gone that route. Glad that did not work out. But you know, it is you know, it does open doors. And what I've seen happen in grad school is you kind of specialize almost from the get-go of whether or not you're going to be a teacher or are you going to be a researcher, and then you kind of go from there.
I mean, no offense to the people that I used to work with at the biotech, but like, I look at LinkedIn, and a lot of them, after 5 years, they're either in the same positions or like one position higher. And if you think about like a 10% raise, you can just do the math. You know, I'd be making $50,000 a year versus Like now I'm applying for jobs that are like in San Diego, like 70 or 80 starting, with like 120 as being like a normal, like scientist level pay. I mean, San Diego is a lot higher than, obviously these hubs are going to be a lot, paid a lot higher, but I don't know what the biotech, job market is.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be in the proverbial coastal elite places.
Exactly.
All of the California cities are going to have like some biotech startups. Boston is a massive pharmaceutical biotech hub with all the different institutes. Like the Northeast in general is pretty packed.
I mean, Utah is pretty decent. Like it's not as bad as you would expect. Like we have Myriad Genetics and Ancestry and like BioFire, BioLife. Like we have a bunch of different labs, more than you would expect out here, which was kind of interesting to start learning about once I started getting interested in the space. But
I mean, there's a lot of reasons. This is what I'm kind of like doing here at this, the nonprofit that I'm volunteering at through City Hall is basically trying to create more of like a technology hub here. So the idea, and it's crazy. There were a bunch of people like, and I was the only person that actually like worked at one of these technology companies, one of the biotechs, so it's kind of interesting talking to them, like what they thought their vision was versus like what it actually is. And it's like, biotech specifically, think about a regular software development company versus a biotech. A biotech has like a lot of companies that actually need to be there in a physical form because they're making a physical product, right? So they have like a plant they're selling, they have a product they're selling. So you have to analyze that product. You have to, and that's a company. You have to create the materials and the vessels and the everything in order to source those companies. So it's like it creates like an ecosystem of other companies, and they can't really move because you can't like just send your sequencing out to like China. You can't really outsource it to China yet, I guess. But like, think of that versus like how people used to think about it, kind of like with software development companies, incentivizing software development hubs. Those companies, man, they get bought out. You invest as a city. Think about that. You're investing all this money, all this time into getting people actually like creating these companies, the hubs and all that kind of stuff. And then they just go, they just leave. They leave your city and you're like, fuck, like we lost, we lost all these jobs. So a biotech specifically gets a whole ecosystem of companies. So I'm not surprised to see like more and more cities kind of like realizing that and going in that direction. That's good.
Yeah, it's the scientifically flavored factory town, and that's ultimately what kind of scares me, like personally, about going into industry, and maybe more specifically biotech. Probably less of an issue with like pharma, but like the job security, right? If the project that the biotech is formed around just plummets and eats shit, or walks out to a clinical trial and falls flat, because sometimes that just happens, then okay, cool, everybody's out of a job, and like, fuck that town, everyone's just packing up and leaving because now they got to go find another job somewhere else, and everything crumbles in its wake. So like that to me is kind of frightening, and that's why I think really want to see more government scientist positions actually open up, because that's something that like it comes with job security, it's stable, it comes with a pension, like people can actually post up and do good, meaningful, public service in science without like the crippling issues of academia. It's not toxic. You have money, you can do things, you don't have to worry about supplies, you don't have to worry about grant writing, but also it's got job security that you wouldn't necessarily have in biotech, and hopefully a little bit more meaning than just going to be a Pfizer drone making.
Exactly. That's the dichotomy you end up with after, grad school or postdoc. It's, do I want to be a corporate shill and make bank, or do I want to do research, but, probably not make as much money?
I mean,
it's fun.
It's a lot of consideration. If you want like more of a stable, position, there's bigger biotechs. Like Illumina, for example, is basically the Microsoft of like biotechs right now. You can get a job at Illumina and you're pretty much like set for the rest of your life if you really want to, but that's not how people actually do well. You do well by jumping from, company to company. So like for me personally, I'm going to be looking for, like when I apply this later this year, is like those smaller companies, because it's higher risk, higher reward, like Marcus said. But at the same time, like as the company grows, you grow with it. And like you grow and start going up that step ladder with them. And if you do well, then the company does well and you get rewarded with it. And so it's, I mean, I like, personally, I like the smaller biotechs, like kind of like I hate when people say familial because it's not like a family. It's like the opposite of family.
I'm about biotech.
But yeah, it's like, you know, everyone's name, dude. You know, and you're like, hey, how's your dog? Like, how's, you know, like, what's up? Like, you know, it's like, you know, people, as opposed to literally, you know, what you're saying, like, I'm a cog in the fucking wheel, dude. Like, there's 20,000 employees. Nobody cares about you. Nobody knows your name. You know, that's kind of, I don't like that either.
I mean, I worked at a COVID lab here, and it's like it's a pretty local lab, and there were like 20 of us that did the qPCR prep. And even then, like, I knew everyone's names, I knew everyone, but I still hated doing the same shit every single day. You know, like running qPCR prep can only be so entertaining for so long.
I did it professionally too. I know what you mean. I mean, there you have, like, at the end of the day, you're moving small liquids from one tube to the other. You know what I mean? There's not, that's it.
No, into a 96 well plate.
Yeah.
With 96 saliva samples.
Well, and one day a robot's going to take your job. And that's what I did. I programmed the robot so we could do 20,000, you know, genotyping at like genotypes a day. So, with sequencing. So you're like, you know, but at the end of the day, I feel like you have to kind of like want to improve the assay. You want to make it cheaper. You want to try new things. You want to try like a new technology. Like if you can get in a biotech, if you can get into the research and development side, it's a lot like being in an academic lab where you're trying out new things.
Yeah, but they can cut your research at any time if it's not profitable.
Yeah, but they're not going to cut you. They're not going to just cut you. They're going to transfer
they cut
you.
Your research. Even if you are really interested in that research project, they can tell you to just, you know, stop.
Of course.
It's not going to be profitable for the company.
I mean, that's kind of nice. I mean, it was kind of funny. There's been multiple times at my old job where it's like, they were like, okay, you're working on plant genotyping. You're doing this with robots. And then boom, next day they were like, okay, you're working on yeast genetics now. And you care about lipids. And I was like, whoa, like, damn, that's a huge shift. But like, hell yeah, I'm down. Yeast, let's go. You know, but meanwhile, all the PhDs are like around me that I was working with are just in shambles. They were like, all I knew was plant genetics. Oh my God, I don't know anything about yeast. Like, how could I ever work on yeast? You know, but like,
see, I like that familiarity, but I don't like repetitive. So it has to be. So I feel like, you know, academic research is kind of where I should be at because it's familiar in that you're in the same environment, you're doing similar research, like over a large time scale, but it's usually something different over like, you know, that time scale of that research project.
Here's the difference that I've seen bouncing between government and like academia, higher ed. In like, if you get to the right place in higher ed, you basically carve out your own niche for yourself, and you like, you know, and you're able, like, you control that space 100% for better or worse. Government, it was like, okay, you're going to do this, and it's very, just like Greg said, it's very predictable. It's the same kind of shit. Every once in a while, there might be a monkey throwing a wrench in things and things changing. But I actually kind of liked that when I was with the government, because like the higher ed thing can be so it can be draining. So
yeah, you're definitely wearing multiple hats. Like it is very weird in academia. It is weird that like a professor is going to be kind of like they're going to be the CSO, they're going to be the CEO, they're going to be the CFO. Meanwhile, like I was doing the science for the patents. I wasn't writing the patents, for example. You know, like that, and I don't like writing patents. So it's like I'm not a patent lawyer, so I don't really like it. So it's just nice, you know. Like I'm not out there begging for money. The CEO is out there begging for money. You know, I don't want. I like the science. I don't want to focus on writing grants and all that kind of stuff. So it's actually kind of freeing to be able to focus. If you can get in the right spot. And like I said, I was really fortunate. I was doing research and development. So like when CRISPR came out, like in the Cervisi paper, like in 2013, I like saw that and I was like, dude, this looks like a cool tool. Let's like try it in the lab. And like I was trying to apply CRISPR to a new yeast that had never been done before. So it was kind of like, cutting edge stuff, kind of like academia, but it was for my job. And it's kind of like, I feel like at biotechs, there's a formula. Like, is it going to save you money? Is it going to make our product better? You have a way and a way of talking to your boss where it's like, how are they going to say no to that? You know what I mean? It kind of like, it gives you like a mechanism of saying like, in challenging authority and actually getting things done. And I personally really like that.
I will say this. It's going to sound really weird. I imagine, so going back to like the higher ed thing, I imagine it's a lot like being a Twitch streamer in some regards, because like your chat kind of determines, whether or not you're going to stick around. And when those student evaluations come out, it takes me a really long time to look at those, because those are that's basically my chat telling me like whatever the fuck they want to. And sometimes it can be very, what I want to say, it can hurt. I definitely make sure I have a bottle of wine.
It's like reading mean comments on if you're a YouTuber, like
dude,
reading mean
nothing's
comments.
like undergrads like giving you like the reports are great. Those are the worst, man. Those hurt so bad. They just like throw those comments in there.
When you're an undergrad and you've had a professor you've hated all semester
It's
to
awful.
be
It's
able to
cathartic.
just shit on them.
Of course, I know.
My
but
OChem professors probably cried themselves to sleep.
I hope my first OChem professor cried his stupid ass to sleep. Fuck that
We
guy.
had 3 OChem professors at my school, and they all were fucking blowhard assholes. Oh my god. Anyway.
Whoa. I'm hearing another side of this that I didn't know existed.
Dude, I told you guys.
Reading some of my student evals when I taught, and they were always just like the funniest, most contradictory things, because like the people like at the front of the classroom were like, yeah, he was good, but he like yelled a lot, and then the people in the back of the classroom were like, yeah, he was really good, but he was really quiet. Well, it's like, okay, what the fuck do you want me to do? I'm yelling for the people in the back. The people in the front have to sit somewhere, so like, okay, cool. Like this helps me not at all. Like this is fucking useless. So half the time it's just like people saying dumb shit in the evals, but then the other half of the time it's actual like venting.
Yeah, that's kind of like a weird thing too. Like figuring out and talking to professors, and you find out that like very, very few actually like to teach. Like they're teaching because they have to, because they want to do research at an R1.
Well, I was at a teaching college, so like the only research you did was if you had students interested in doing research with you. Like it was very teaching oriented, and I loved it because you never had a professor like that. You never had a professor that was only teaching so that they could do research.
You'd be surprised what they're saying at the bar. So I'm just saying.
Well, I mean,
Professor Q's smiling.
The university I was at was just set up.
There's still a publishing expectation at teaching universities.
I don't think any of my professors that I had published a paper while they worked there.
Oh, they kind of have to.
I mean, like once you get tenure at a teaching college, you don't have to like publish anything else. Like you know, and a lot of people I've seen publish their 3 or 4 articles that they need for tenure. Then that's it. They never publish anything again because they're like, well, I did my thing. I got my tenure. I'm good. Where I'm at now, even after you get tenure, there's an expectation you'll publish at least 2 articles a year, at least within my social science, sociology. I don't know what it is for like the hard sciences because there's different expectations. So yeah, I hate having worked at like 2 teaching places, I hate it that they use that kind of descriptor because it's a little disingenuous because it's kind of like what actually it is like you end up teaching way more, but you have almost the same requirement for tenure. So
yeah, teaching's like, and even the ones that love it, they're just like, oh, I'm teaching this quarter. Like, oh, I got so much stuff to do. And you're like, and even what pisses me off is even when you hear a professor say that and you're like, you just like created it and you're up there maybe an hour a week, but I'm sitting here grading lab reports for like 5 hours a week. You know, you're just like, damn, I'm so jealous, honestly, of the professor like teaching, because I feel like all the actual work is on grad students, but I don't know. That's just what it feels like.
I don't use my grad students like that.
Damn.
At all.
Use Scantrons or something? Scantron. I hated Scantrons, by the way, but now I'm like, every test must be a Scantron.
I'm just I have my kind of, again, I call everything a scam, but I have my scam kind of worked out for my classes, and I just...
Once you write it and
really,
you get the PowerPoint slides done and stuff, it's kind of like, you know, one hard year maybe, but then you're just kind of like cruising, it feels like. I don't know. It's just what it seems like.
I mean, I'm a little bit of an anomaly because I've bounced around so much, and I'm finally, for the first time, I'm at a place where I'm teaching the same courses over and over. This is the first time that's happened. Oh, it's so fucking nice. Like, I don't have to like learn a whole new field each semester like I was doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just weird. I don't know if like the teaching life too, it has like, you know, if you have any inkling you want to like have a family, do anything like that. I mean, your priority number one, like on the weekends and stuff, isn't necessarily like your family. It's just kind of, I feel like the lifestyle of, you know, the biotech is very like 9 to 5. Once it hits 5, like, I was going surfing. I didn't care what was going on. It could wait till tomorrow. Everything's going in the 4 degree and I'm in the water, you know, like, so, you know, here it's like, you know, in grad school, it's like 24/7, just a slog, you know, and emails at 2 a.m. You're expected to answer within like 10 hours, you know.
I think
it's
that
just
depends on your PI.
Yeah, but there's a lot of like, you're right, but at the same time, it's like there's international groups that you're trying to collaborate with. There's different time zones. There's lab meetings that you're trying to. It's just all these different things, all these different cogs. And my lab's actually kind of nice about that. Like my other grad school people, they have way more meetings than I do. It's awful.
I mean, I like my lab, since it's so small. It's just I just work 8 to 3, like 7-hour days, and I go home. That's it. I mean, I know I'm a lab tech. I'm not like a graduate student yet, but like even with the PhD that was working in the lab that got his PhD in that lab, like he said he did 8-hour days, and sometimes he went over, but he would just leave early the next day. That was it. He said it's very easy to have a healthy relationship with it in the lab I'm in. So
yeah, anything in like biology, life sciences, especially if you're like waiting on cells to grow or mice to breed or some shit, like it forces you to have a more healthy work-life balance because you're just waiting for things out of your control to happen.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I hear a lot of people like, you know, when you're in grad school, you have to be there 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like, and when I started working in the lab I'm working in, it was just a very different environment from what I had heard it would be like. And
yeah, that's boomer shit. Like that's just that's labor exploitation. Anyone who tells you that wants to exploit your labor.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry,
No, I refuse to let that happen. Like when they were looking at hiring a postdoc to replace the PhD that's leaving, I sat down with my boss and I was like, so you're going to tell this person, whoever they are, that we have a set schedule here, right? Like I'm not going to be expected to come in at 9 p.m. to do shit for them, right? And he was like, oh, you'll be like autonomous after this. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, like there is, as long as you're getting your stuff done, like that's the thing, is like once you understand an assay, once you understand like a test or something like that, you can like have things go overnight. You can get your digest going, or especially in biology. I mean, there's like 12, 16-hour reactions all the time. But you know, if you're not getting your stuff done, if you don't have results to present, if you're not getting involved, like it's going to be a bad time either way. So the big thing for me is like figuring out where you want to do research, why you want to do it, and doing that. Like, you know, for example, like I made a conscious decision, like even though everyone was telling me, I actually even went to an NIH presentation, and they were like, whatever you're getting your PhD in is great, but like we actually want you to be a data scientist. So I was like, okay. But like I just hate coding. Like I just hate it. I don't like it. I don't really care about it. So I'm just not having that skill. So it's just like, you know, like whatever. I like wet lab work. I like doing the lab work. So that's just like where my expertise is going to be, and I made a conscious decision about that.
Ooh.
Alrighty, yeah, we might want to wrap it up, especially because Read and Rap is harassing me to share the 7-page miniature manifesto I wrote about my first year PhD biochemistry professor in the fucking reviews.
Sounds scandalous.
I had to retract it because somebody told on me because I insulted the fuck out of this person.
Oh,
And
damn.
I was like, he said mean things in the review to the fucking department head. So I was like, fine, all right, you have to take away my anonymity. Great, awesome. But besides the point,
you got a fun person in your chat.
all right, we'll address that in a moment.
I'm gonna unmute your stream promptly because I want to hear this.
Grumma, do you want to hop in Discord to share your newest ad?
Yeah, I'll do that real quick.
All right,
right.
I'll give you the time to do the shout out after you do that. Greg, and then Amber, and then Professor Q. Shout yourselves out in that order.
Hola, my name is Greg, and I have a YouTube channel called The Peer Review, thepeer.review. And I'm going to be streaming actually this Tuesday on In Time. Going to be talking about climate change solutions there. So that should be good. And that's it.
Oh, wait, is it me next?
I don't remember.
Yeah, Amber, go ahead.
I like how Professor Q and I were like, I am DN Amber. The DN stands for D's Nuts. I stream on Twitch. that was an ASMR D's Nuts. I stream on Twitch Mondays and Fridays, and then I'm here on Thursdays. I usually play video games. Sometimes I do super original React content, but most of the time it's gaming and nerding out and raging over politics at the same time. So if you also have ADHD, you're welcome to join.
Yeah, and I'm Professor Q, and you can now find me on Twitter using my username that you see in chat. I'm up to antics there and trying to think of what else. Yeah, you can find me here Thursdays. That's it.
Nice.
Very cool. All right, we can wrap up the video part here, and then Grandma hop into Discord real quick, and we'll make it happen.
Later, folks.
Alrighty, everyone.
right.
It's been
Good
fun.
to see all you faces. Bye.
Yes, likewise.
Bye.
Adios. Right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Tuesday at 4:30, 5 o'clock. Or if you wanted to be in chat, or if not, you can just check out the VOD. So it's going to be fun. Yep. We're going to talk about climate change and climate change solutions. So if you're interested,